Had a friend who did that with her daughter, would put her in one of those bouncy swings far enough away from her that she would never touch. Her neighbors kept calling the cops. And it got to the point where she was like, I'm done lifting. I don't want to keep doing this if they're going to keep calling the cops on me and saying I'm endangering my child. So she stopped working out altogether.
Calling the cops for what?
Child endangerment. That's what I'm saying. It takes one person to ruin especially in the age of social media.
Mm-hmm.
You get one negative Nelly and then a parent's like, well, then I can't do this anymore. And I know that's a specific story, but.
No, but I mean, it brings up when I hear stupid shit like that, I think things like, so if you're mowing your lawn, right, and you have the kid on, your chest in a backpack or whatever it is, is that not the same?
Yeah, they're.
It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk.
All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Nancy Johnson. Did I say that right? Okay. And quick intro. I'm a pro strongman athlete, 3-time national champion, under 75 kg, world's strongest
woman.
I know, but it says WSM even on your Instagram.
That's fair.
Everybody knows what it is, right? It's just a weird thing. World record with a 161.3 kg stone. Top 5 in the Shaw Classic in 2022 and 2024, just recently.
Yes.
A USMC vet and student of physical education and social work.
Yes.
There's also been some bodybuilding in there, some powerlifting in there, and highland games in there.
Mostly for the rocks.
Yes, which is going to bring me to the first question. And that will be, you've competed very successfully in the strongman stage, also in powerlifting, bodybuilding, highland games, pretty much all string sports. If you had to compete in one sport that was not a strength sport, what would it be? And would it be dance? So
did you have another one? I didn't know if you.
No. I'm putting dance out there because that is in your background, right? But take all the strength sports aside. If you had to compete in one sport that was not a strength sport.
Okay, I wasn't great at dancing, so I don't think I should go back to that. I'm very clumsy. But I would probably go back to rowing. I was actually really good at rowing in high school. My high school was on a river, so we had that luxury of just rowing right there. I could have gone to college for it, but I unfortunately did not pursue it.
When did you start the rowing?
My freshman year of high school.
So you did it for many, many years.
I did it for 4 years. We were like 7th, and my boat was 7th in the nation by the time I left the team. But at that point, my father was coaching and we were having a rough patch. So I chose to avoid our issues and I left the team instead of sticking with the team.
Did you do it long enough to, I don't want to say screw your hands up because it can be an asset, because some rowers that I've met, their hands are so jacked up that if you tell them to do a hook grip, they don't even know it hurts, which is amazing.
That's an interesting point. I mean, I'm not great at hook grip, but I don't think it's because of rowing. I think I've actually learned more about how to take care of my calluses because of rowing.
Yeah.
Like the hot tea bag tricks and different things like that. So I feel like my hands are okay. I have good grip.
Yeah, we had somebody out for one of my train your ass off clinics that I think was a professional rower. I mean, basically she'd been rowing her whole life. Never really deadlifted before. So Tom Shepard and I were like, yeah, just here's the hook grip and just we're telling everybody, don't tell her it's supposed to hurt. Just let her think this is just normal. Right?
They'll do this.
It's you know what I'm saying? So, and the weight kept going up, and we're looking at each other like, what the fuck? This, I don't think this is bothering her at all. Then we find out later on that her hands were just basically trashed from all the years of rowing from that the nerves and so forth. It was, I'm like, how awesome is this, right? Because normally you have to go through the whole learning curve of, it gets hurt, but then after a while it won't be so bad, but it still sucks.
Yeah, and you're like, let's convert you to powerlifting. Yeah, because you'd be good at this.
Mm-hmm. So after high school, what led you to the military? What was the deciding factor for that?
Most of my plan A's, plan B's, I didn't have money to go to college at the point. My sister had already joined the military, and I know if she could do it, I could do it.
What
And
branch was?
she was in the Marine Corps as well.
All right.
Actually, all three of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of us were in the Marine Corps. And because she had done it, I knew I could do it. And not having a current plane at the time, I was like, let's go do that. And it set me up for so much success. I have healthcare now. I went to school with the GI Bill. I met some of the best people in the world. I met my coach from the Marine Corps. And I learned a lot more about being a stronger person and growth and all those wonderful character traits just being in the military.
So tell me, because my son is now in the process of, I want to say joining the Navy, but he's in prep because the ASVAB, weird story, and because you had to take the ASVAB. There's a minimum ASVAB you're supposed to have. He didn't hit the minimum, but they said that's cool. You can get in anyhow. And then after he gets in, they know you can't really start basic until you actually get a higher ASVAB. So he's in like a prep course for the ASVAB, which he'll be able to get that, then go into basic. And so, I'm seeing what he's kind of going through. He's excited one day, not excited one day, excited one day, not excited. How was it for you going through? Now, your sister already went through, so you kind of knew.
She had been in for 2 years. She actually sent me letters that got me in trouble quite a bit because she knew how to play that game. I
forget, because they are screening your shit.
Yeah, they're looking at all your letters. So you're supposed to receive letters that say Recruit Johnson, and she would write Lance Corporal Johnson, Corporal Johnson, and just absolutely mess with me. And I want to say she sent me some packages that got me in trouble too. But overall, at first I was like, this is the hardest mental thing I've ever done. But watching other people crumble around me, I don't want to say I enjoyed that, but when somebody crumbles around you and you're like, oh, this sucks, but like I'm not crumbling, it makes you tougher. And you're like, oh, I can keep going.
Is that through basic that you're saying that?
Yes. Because their whole point is to break you down, turn you into a person that you've never seen before so that you are instantly willing to obey every order. And that's the hardest part. It's all mental. I could do the physical. The physical was easy. It was getting screamed at, being controlled, not having your own autonomy. Like those things are very hard. And then once you get to your actual schoolhouse, they treat you like a person again. Like, yes, you're a lower rank, but you're a person again. You can say I, you can say myself, you can say your name. And honestly, it was tough mentally, but it was a wonderful stepping stone for my life.
Did you kind of know what you wanted to specialize in when you first went in?
I didn't know anything
about military. Hell yeah, right. It's kind of where he is.
Yeah, it's based off your ASVAB score. And I went in with a logistics contract, but I went to infantry training because they were trying to integrate females at that point. So I went to that school first and I got a mortarman's certification first. And I thought, wow, okay, now I get to be infantry. But at the end of that school, they were like, actually, you're still a girl, so you have to go do logistics instead. And that killed me. But when I was deployed, I did get to do the mortarman stuff and I loved it. Towards the end of my time, I retook my ASVAB, hoping to go explosive ordnance disposal. Could not get my GT score up high enough. So
what did it have, just out of curiosity, what did it have to be for that?
My GT score, which is a sub-score of the zero score, had to be 110, and I think I could only get it to 107. And you have to wait, it might have been 6 months at the time, each time you want to retake it. So even if your son enters and doesn't love the first job he has, finish the tour. It's 4 years, do the job, retake your ASVAB at any point, whenever they say you can, and you can go for a different job. You learn so much more about the jobs that are out there.
That's one of the biggest struggle that we've had with him, because the first time he took it, just pre-enlisting or whatever that time period was, he got a fucking 7, right? So
the whole score?
Yeah. So exactly.
That had to be nerves.
Well, that plus, I mean, a part of me is like, is he a genius? Because you'd have to purpose. You would guess better than a 7, right? And then it was a 17, and that's what they kind of floated him in on, and now it's what he needs, like a 30.
So they probably did a waiver. Now they're trying to help him because they see the potential, and they're hurting for people because our country is...
they did the waiver to get him in, and even with all that, we were still trying to tell him, like, retake it, because what jobs you're going to do is going to be dependent upon this. And, they're younger, right? They don't give a fuck,
Especially if they're letting him retake it now. Yeah. Why not take those opportunities? Because they might not be as easily accessible later.
So now he sees, the higher I can get this, then he's got all kinds of welding certifications. Then he could be a CB. He can be, it plays into these other roles that actually matter. It's like for a time period, he's like, I'll get in and I'll figure it out. And it's like, well, Not really.
Mhm.
If you're 17, you know, you're going to be cleaning you're going to be
Yeah, you're not going to be
mopping
well
toilets.
treated.
Exactly.
It's like people who go in open contract and they'll get like a supply job, or they'll get, we call them chow marines, and they're the ones doing the mess out in the field. And they're like, I hate my life. And everyone's like, well, you took an open contract. Open contract means they can give you whatever the heck they want. So you need to be a little more specific when you enter. But even if he doesn't like it for those first 4 years, that sets him up for life. Even if he doesn't stay in,
Yeah.
he now has college, health, so many death benefits, so many things, or he can change his job.
Yeah.
Not
Well, and
spoiled.
it's a bubble that he's not going to get in trouble with.
Yeah. When
You know,
when he finishes school, you're going to see a totally different person.
yeah.
And you're going to be so, like, you're probably already obviously so proud of him,
Yeah.
but he's going to be more of a man than you've ever seen
Yeah.
before.
Every other conversation now, I see a little bit of that. Because we get like the 5-minute call once a week or whatever.
Okay.
You know, until he gets through basic.
Oh, so he's currently there.
Well, yeah, he's currently there. So he's currently, God, this is long. He's currently in the prep program. Right?
Okay.
And they allowed 2 times. So the first time he was 1 point away. So then he started the second prep program. And this is before basic. A week into that, he had his appendix removed. So now he's 4 to 6 weeks and he's not home, but he's in like the recovery
Waiting
platoon or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's interesting because somebody's always getting in trouble for something, you know, so he can't have personal reading material, which means he can't have his guide to be able to help him study for the asthma. He has like the two manuals, like here's the 2 books.
Right.
And as soon as they get close to being able to have personal reading material, somebody's shipping porn or
Right.
something in,
Messes
and
it up.
everybody gets wrecked because of that. So as soon as he heals from having his appendix removed, then he'll go back in the prep program. Then after that, go into basic. So we've seen his graduation date move all the way to hopefully December now, as long as nothing else.
Okay,
And
that's
so,
close.
as long as he gets through the damn thing is the key thing, because we don't want to have him sent back home.
Right.
Because if he gets sent back home, I know for a fact he's not going to study. Where if he's there, he's around other people.
Right.
Good and bad. You know, some of them probably don't really want to be there. You know, they are trying to find their way out, where other ones do. But he is around some people that scored 90s and stuff like that.
Right.
And it's like, you know, that should be your social friend group.
Yeah. There's definitely a mix of like people who are just fighting to get home and people who are fighting to stay in those platoons. And there's a lot of busy work because you're not actively training.
When did you go? Was it Bulgaria?
Yes. I went to Bulgaria.
How many years in?
I joined at the end of 14. I think I went mid 2016, so about a year and a half in. And I remember when I got deployed, because I had to leave my unit to go attach to another unit, everyone in my unit was upset because I was the newest one there. I was like, well, I'm better at the job than you. That's why they're sending me.
Now, did you have any desire for strength training, powerlifting,
No.
before that?
No. When I left rowing, I started running. And when I deployed, I couldn't run. We were on this base where it was basically just 2 mountains. And I would go up and down the mountains and up. And I would just get so tired of it. And my platoon sergeant at the time was like, why don't you start powerlifting? And a few of the guys started teaching me how to powerlift, which can be sketchy. You know, you have guys telling a girl how to powerlift, and you're like, oh, they're trying to get her to hang out with them or whatever. But they all really had well intentions for me. They were teaching me form and helping me learn how to deadlift, squat, all those wonderful things. And I fell in love with powerlifting.
Mentioned, and it may or may not be, because it kind of cut out again, that you pulled 315 with the training that you were doing. What type of powerlifting training was it? I mean, when you say that you were training with these guys that were powerlifting, like, say, what level were they at? Forget the level, how many years of training experience?
That's a really good question. I'm glad you brought it back to that, because these guys weren't formal powerlifters by any means. They were not competing. They were military meatheads. So we did squat, bench, dead, but there was no structure. Every week they would try and see what we could get Nancy next to. And I loved that because it was very different from endurance sports. I was never the fastest runner. I was never the fastest rower. And I mean, I was in a boat, but getting to that point and they're just seeing what I can do each week, you know, we're hitting new PRs every week, those beginner gains every week. So it was really unstructured. the entire time we were out there because they didn't have concrete plans that they were working off of, and they didn't know how to teach me about that. So I didn't learn anything about actual programming. I just learned more about technique and form.
Because you have body build, so you kind of have reference or frame of reference from that. Would you say it was more just like heavy bodybuilding?
Yes, in a way, with the accessories for sure. A lot of the main movements were, let's hit a 1 rep max today, but we wouldn't do back offsets, and we wouldn't do EMOMs or AMRAPs or anything like that. And now that I know all of that, I'm like, a lot of things could have been different in the beginning. But when I came back to the States and I met my coach later that year, he had started teaching me. He started showing me strongman, but at the same time, he was helping me follow powerlifting for a little bit. And that's where I realized, like, oh, there's a structure and there's a process to this. You can't just go lift whatever you want every day and expect it to work.
Yeah, well, I like this military meathead thing, by the way. So I'm trying to put context behind, like, what is a military meathead? And I'm sure it's like, what is a meathead? There's a lot of variants to that.
They care about their undershirt looking tight. You know, when they take off their blouse, they want to look buff. They want to be the fastest runner, but they also want to look like the biggest guy in the room, just cuts.
So it was more look-based than strength-based, or even?
I would say it's a little even, just a little more chaotic because of the look feeling.
Now, would you say that the training might not have been as periodized just because of the deployment and you don't know exactly what's going on?
Yes. We didn't know who was going to go on an exercise next. We didn't know when I was going to have to. I went to the flight line a lot because I was the logistical element. So there were a lot of pieces we couldn't really factor in. So we were trying to just have fun.
Yeah.
And that was a huge, and kill time. We were so bored. It was either go drink at the rec center or go to the gym. And I liked drinking, but I also was realizing that was the time in my life where I was realizing if I stop drinking, I'm actually performing better in the gym. And I was only 20 at the time, so I really shouldn't have been drinking, but I was finishing a full bottle of JMO by myself.
Okay, so if you can be in the Marines and then be representing the country and defending the country basically overseas, I got a problem with I'm not old enough to drink.
If you can serve your country, you should be able to drink. Absolutely.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yes, with parameters, and you know, there's always some guy who ruins it for everybody else. But
so that was 2 years in, and then when you came out, how did you stay involved? When did because you powerlifted for a while, right? So when you came out, was it training for powerlifting meets? And then how did that come to be?
When I was getting out of the military, I was still in North Carolina, and I thought I was going to move back to Virginia, and I actually had a roommate situation fall through. And at the time, I was trickling into strongman, and that's when I had the thought of I could stay here, go to college here, and continue strongman. Because in my mind, if I left the state, I wasn't going to pursue strongman with a coach out of state. I didn't think about how those things could work.
Yeah, well, logistics too. You got to plan. Yeah.
I just didn't know enough about virtual, all that stuff. I still needed a lot of in-person work. So when I got out and I started trickling into strongman, it kind of quickly took over because the chaoticness is never the same. The preps are always different. The equipment's always different. The feeling's always different. You can hit a PR in so many different ways than you can in powerlifting. And I still loved powerlifting. And that's actually how I met my boyfriend, was through powerlifting. I would drive an hour on Friday night and Saturday morning to go train with the powerlifting team in Wilmington, and then come back and still try and do strongman. And I was trying to balance the two for a while, and I realized it kind of wasn't working for me.
How did the strongman come into the fold?
So my coach brought me out to his house, which, again, other people were like, oh, a guy's bringing you out to his house. What the heck?
But how? You know what I'm saying? So you've come back.
Okay.
Right? And so after you come back, I assume you're trying to figure out what to do with your life.
Yes.
School and...
So I lost my staff NCO, and I was actually in charge of my section as a sergeant. And I worked in close proximity to him because some of our offices got moved into this big open room kind of like this. And we would shoot shit. And we didn't like each other at first. Like, I was always like, oh, he's arrogant. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And then I kind of put my ego in check, and I was like, this guy's been doing strongman and powerlifting for so much longer than me. He knows what he's talking about. So when he invited me out to his house, I was like, he's extending that branch. He's saying, let me help you. And the first time I went out to his house, we played with stones, which are my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
And just got hooked. It was such an instant.
So how's this conversation? Like, you come out to his house, he's like, go pick up this stone? I mean, how did that?
So
Because you would think if you have a powerlifting background and it's weights, it's going to be squatting and crap like that. The last thing I would think is go pick up the,
I think because he had been giving me pieces of advice about powerlifting along the way when we were working in proximity to each other, and I knew he knew what he was talking about with those things, that helped me check my ego. And when he was like, I think you would enjoy strongman. At first I was like, no, why would I like that? I don't know anything about that. And then he brought me out to his house. It was me, one other guy. We were the first training 3 of our team, which has now grown. Probably seen 30 different people go through it now in the last 6 years. But just going out to his house and training with 2 guys who were so intent on showing me their sport.
This makes sense now. So he basically had his own little strongman community going on, right?
I'm sorry.
Okay, because most of those guys, it's like the weekend, they train wherever they want, but then on Saturday it's events. And
in my world, a lot of people realize that if you can't find the gyms that have the equipment, you just start racking them up. You start buying them. During COVID, I was living in an apartment and buying stuff off the pay-as-you-go plans and putting them in a storage unit just so I had stuff. And I would take them into local gyms. He had a full garage set up. He had stuff in his backyard. And we got to the point where we were doing weekend trainings. Still does those. So once a week, everyone comes out to the house. They train as a team. You get that community feeling.
Yeah.
And it's so much fun. Just like, I'm sure you remember that West Side feeling of just who you care about.
Yeah. The way that we do things out here, like Saturday squad day,
right?
Bench days on Sunday, then people train wherever they.
Yes. I just forget that it's not that common for everyone to have a garage gym. Whereas once I got addicted to it, I was like, I need my own garage gym. I need all the stuff.
Yeah.
You never have all the stuff.
All right, so while you were doing that, then how were you training during the week?
I was doing squat bench dead during the week and only strongman on the weekends.
Okay. Got it.
That was where things were getting weird because I wasn't getting faster in moving events. I was statically really strong, and I still am, but my moving events were not getting any better. And there came a point where we realized we need to pick one or the two, and I was already so obsessed with strongman. I was winning every strongman competition I went into, and that was just such a strong, oh my God, I could be amazing at this. I should keep doing this. I should pursue this. And it was giving me so much enjoyment, especially after leaving the military and feeling a little bit lost because I didn't know kind of where you're going after you read what could have been a career. You're like, what do I do next? And that's where I leaned into strongman harder.
Was there a reason why you decided to not make it a career?
Not being able to go explosive ordnance disposal did really impact my decision. And there were a few different things. They wanted to send me to Japan on my next contract, and I had just bought a sports car. So my 21-year-old brain goes, oh, I'm going to deny these orders. And that messes you up on paper. That makes you look like a bad candidate for reenlistment again. So there were just little things that didn't work out well for me. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I can go to college now. And if I want to, come back as an officer. There's nothing saying I can't do that.
Yeah. Now, with college, did you know what you wanted to study?
Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
I always knew I wanted to work in physical education. But once I got into physical education, I realized how messed up it is. How was your physical education when you were in school?
When I was in school, we were still moving and sweating and
year long.
On our side, we had the presidential's, physical fitness exam with the chin ups and all that other kind of stuff.
And you were probably held to really good standards.
Yeah. Yeah.
There were high expectations. You weren't just sitting out because...
No, you couldn't sit out.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you
were injured.
You would fail it.
Yes.
You'd have to repeat it. And it was not a, what the word I'm looking for, it wasn't optional.
Yeah.
You had to, it was mandatory.
And when I was going through school, it was like that until it slowly started to not become like that. Mm-hmm. You have schools that do, oh, we're only going to do PE 6 months out of the year. That's not productive. Oh, we're only going to do this up until 10th grade. That's not productive either. Some schools would say, oh, if you're on a sports team, you don't have to do PE. That I can get behind if you're actively involved in the sports team. But all those breakdowns were reasons I wanted to go into physical education. And as I was doing that, when I got to Virginia, my first course with the head of the department, she's preaching, you should meet kids where they're at. You should teach them things they love, not just sports, but movements that they can enjoy for their whole life. And I'm like, yes, I'm passionate about this. This is what we need. Until we started lesson planning and teaching kindergarten that year. And I realized that she's grading me based off what she wants. and it's her way or the highway. And I'm talking to other people that educate in North Carolina, Texas, across the country, and they're like, as bad as you want to change physical education, it's declining. And you are at the mercy of the school. If the school says no, you're playing basketball every day of the week, you're playing basketball. You're not allowed to play dodgeball anymore. Can't call them suicides anymore. Like the whole structure of physical education was falling apart. I was just so lost in the program knowing that I didn't agree with that program anymore. And you've heard guys talk about exercise science where they go to certain courses or they see certain people and they're like, you shouldn't be in charge of this. You have no idea.
No, I mean, and the sad part about that is certain motor abilities are developed as a child. Maximum motor abilities, if it's endurance, physical acuity, and there's age ranges to where those should be taught.
Yes.
And the curriculum used to have things in there for those things.
Yes.
Dodgeball had a reason outside of just trying to hit somebody else in the face.
Yes.
There's physical acuity and all this other kind of stuff. And so the kids are missing all the developmental time.
Yes. The reaction, you're saying. And the other piece of dodgeball suicides is we're teaching kids to be more sensitive in physical education realms. We're teaching them that, because this kind of doesn't feel good, you don't have to do it. Or everyone gets a participation trophy. I'm not like that. If we're doing a contest, there's a winner. However, there's nothing wrong with saying, well, Timmy did a great job at this piece and Tommy did a great job at this piece. Like giving them compliments and critiquing them at the same time, but everyone can't be a winner. And the programs that are unfortunately still rolling out are everyone's a winner, everyone's this, everyone's getting softer, and they're teaching kids to be softer athletically. And I could not stay behind that kind of style in teaching. It was just driving me up an absolute wall. And I know you get that because you're not that kind of person. You're not.
Oh, no, I totally get it. And I mean, my kids kind of went through it.
Right.
So you can kind of see the whole thing as it's unfolding, which doesn't make sense, but as a parent, you just take it in your own hands, and it's like, okay, whatever, they're not going to do it, then we'll figure out ways.
Yeah. More parents are pulling their kids out of school.
To implement it, in their own daily lives or whatever it's going to be, because the school system shouldn't be a babysitter,
right.
for one thing. And I see where that pushback kind of comes from, but the parents still need to be parents.
Yeah.
So it's just all weird.
But how many parents aren't healthy also?
Well, exactly.
Or get criticized because they take their kid to the gym with them and everyone's like, that's so unsafe. When the kid's just watching, the kid's like, wow, my mom's so strong. My dad's so cool.
Yes.
They're usually protected and put into safe environments, but the world is very opinionated about these things now.
Almost definitely. And it's going to be interesting to watch how it all unfolds, because there's way more garage gyms now than there ever were before. 2020 changed that or increase that substantially.
Yes.
To where, how many kids, are in the stroller, while the parents are working out in the garage,
just hanging out.
Thousands and thousands and thousands are growing up with their parents working out in the garage. We haven't seen them yet.
Some of them get ruined I had a friend who did that with her daughter, would put her in one of those bouncy swings far enough away from her that she would never touch. Her neighbors kept calling the cops. And it got to the point where she was like, I'm done lifting. I don't want to keep doing this if they're going to keep calling the cops on me and saying I'm endangering my child. So she stopped working out altogether.
Calling the cops for what?
Child endangerment. That's what I'm saying. It takes one person to ruin especially in the age of social media.
Mm-hmm.
You get one negative Nelly and then a parent's like, well, then I can't do this anymore. And I know that's a specific story, but.
No, but I mean, it brings up, when I hear stupid shit like that, I think things like, so if you're mowing your lawn, right, and you have the kid on, your chest in a backpack or whatever it is, is that not the same?
Yeah, they could fall off if anything was
a
trip. It's like, you don't even need to be cooking. You can trip. Anything could happen, but everyone feels like they're so entitled to opinions. And that's also another reason to not go into education, is sometimes the parents have too much opinions against what you're trying to do when you're just trying to make a positive, healthy environment for their children to thrive.
Yeah. Now I'm going back because both of my kids are graduated now, but one thing I found was that, and my oldest is on the spectrum, so I'm dealing with other higher end issues with that as well, is what I found most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, is I had to push back, before I got respect. It was, and I hate to make broad statements about anything, but it was kind of like teachers basically just hated all the kids because none of the parents gave a shit.
Yeah.
Like, so if the parents don't give a shit, they're like, look, I'm not your babysitter. I can't take care of everything, so they're basically doing the minimum. But when I would speak up, sometimes it would be probably more aggressive than what it needed to be. Then in most cases, the teacher was like, oh, okay, now wait a minute. It's like they got a fish on the line. I have somebody that actually gives a shit.
Yes.
So
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
The parents I'm referring to are the ones that are like, my child shouldn't be doing PE. I'm like, your child needs PE.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be the hardest PE in the world, but they need movement.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So we're jumping all over the place. So we'll get to this later. With that powerlifting then, or not the powerlifting, but the strongman, when did it become more formalized? So you, from the very beginning, at some point was it that person that had the gym was your coach?
It was my coach.
Okay. And so at what point did that become, this is more than just like a hobby, just messing around? This is
probably within the first year. So I started at the end of 2018, and by the summer of 2019, so I had won a bunch of local comps. I went to my first nationals, and all I hoped was, I hope I'm top 10. Didn't check the score sheet during the whole show. My coach is keeping it a secret. He's like, I think you're doing okay. Like, he's kind of messing with me. And then we're at awards. They're calling out third place, second place. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'm not even close. They call out my name. And I wasn't just my class winner, but I was the overall middleweight winner. And leaving that show is when him and I really got into the, like, we can go far with this. If we work really hard together, we can absolutely go far. And I think that's when I stopped competing in powerlifting as much, because I wanted to make strongman a priority. And powerlifting is more taxing than like Highland games. So Highland games, I could go jump in, not care if I lost. Whereas powerlifting, I was very emotionally attached to it. So if I didn't do well, I would be upset. So I wanted to give everything to strongman, knowing that I had won my first nationals without even having good technique yet. I had brute strength. I had no technique.
So before that, would you say that powerlifting was more like kind of like your off-season training, and then it would fold out and then the strongman would come in? I guess what I'm asking is, when the Highland was there, did it become like the off-season work, or was it just integrated at the same time?
I guess it was integrated, because I don't have massive off seasons. I'm not great at taking a lot of time off, but I still do SBD stuff all of the time. And my coach is obsessed with West Side stuff. So he's very, very well versed in bands, chains, the different variations of things. So getting to play with those things and seeing how they benefited strongman, because I feel like the two can benefit each other. Just powerlifting is going to benefit strongman more than strongman will benefit powerlifting.
Maybe. I mean, there's we can make cases for that,
I'm
right?
thinking about like moving events specifically.
So how did your training, how was it, what was the base of the training at that time? Because correct me if I'm wrong, usually whatever that base is, once you make that decision, we're going for this.
Yes.
Right? Because actually, let's talk about the mindset of that a little bit first, right? Because that's a pivotal point, that a lot of people, they really kind of don't get to. But
committing to one sport like that?
Not just, it's a commitment at a different level.
Okay.
Right? Yes. Because we have, I guess we could say, recreational powerlifters, right? And underneath that, I guess you could call people that train like powerlifters, but they have no desire to actually compete, right?
Yeah.
And there's people that train like strongman that will have no desire to compete. People that train like bodybuilders that have no desire to compete. But then that next level up would be the competitors.
Yes.
So they do compete, but they're kind of serious about it, but they're not serious. They're feeling the waters out. But then there's that next level of, I'm going all into this shit, and when that level happens, a lot of things change, because now everything matters.
Yes.
Right. Where before, the only things that mattered were the things that conveniently mattered.
Right. I mean, it helped that when I got out of the military, I started working at a nutrition store. So I was already preaching to people what I call the big four. your nutrition, your hydration, your sleep, and your exercise. And if you don't have all 4 of those things, nutrition, including your vitamins, whatever you need. But if you don't have all 4 of those things together, you're not going to be a well-rounded person. So I knew those things. And because I was always heavily involved in physical education and how to teach it and how to share that knowledge, I had that kind of mindset going into it. But once we realized I could go further than a national competition, I was that person that was like, strongman's everything. It's not a hobby. It's my whole identity.
Well, I guess that would be, I think we're just talking our way through the difference between what's an intermediate and a pro, because you have to have a pro mindset before you actually become a pro.
And I've always been heavily competitive. Like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it hard.
So from what I've seen, when that transition, that mind change happens, then you kind of know what you're getting into, but you don't, because it's always going to be way harder than what you think it is. But a base begins to develop, a nutritional base, a training base, the training philosophy, let's say.
Yes.
Right. So if it's conjugate based or whatever it is, it really isn't going to change base wise for the whole rest of your career. You're just going to figure out how to manipulate the things that are off. Where at that intermediate level, we see this all. People will jump from one philosophy to another philosophy to another philosophy. They're all over the place, right?
Which we tried out different stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was hesitant at first. My coach really enjoyed conjugate at the time.
Yeah.
I hated conjugate.
Yeah.
I felt like I would put everything into, if I had 2 main movements that day, I would put everything into the first main movement and not the second. I didn't know how to separate my energy levels or, save some energy properly for those things. And then we tried 5-3-1, and I loved that for a while, but it got to the point where he realized that wasn't bringing me much growth. So we started working towards progressive overload, and I was thriving. And that was where it hooked. And we knew, like, okay, this is the one that works really well for me. And he was still doing conjugate himself, but he knew that it was different for me, and he was meeting me where I was at.
Yeah.
And we traded the bench day for an overhead day. So bench was the one thing, is still the one thing that gets put on the back burner. First.
So how does that, if we go back, so how does that look on a microcycle or a week basis? I assume, are you training on the 7-day split, or is it?
I do 4 days.
So 4 days.
Yes.
And then, so your microcycle, I would assume, would be 4 days.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a 5th day that's cardio and conditioning, but that's
okay. Then it repeats.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That's important to note, right? Because people will have training weeks of 7 days, some 8, and to further the conversation, it helps to kind of know what that microcycle is.
Right.
So what does that look like over the 5 days? Because the 5th day is a rest day, so a cardio day.
I mean, for the last few years, my Mondays have been deadlift and some kind of carry or grip movement, strongman wise. My Wednesdays are overhead, and then I squat on Fridays. I'm somebody who likes to squat after I deadlift in the week, and we added my stone work into those days because we found that taxing me on squats a little bit and then moving into stones was making my resiliency and stone movement stronger in competitions. And then my weekends were for whatever current strongman movements we needed for that prep. That's where we were hammering the ones that didn't happen throughout the week. And then if we needed an extra cardio day, it was like a Thursday or something. It was just tacked in there.
So the weekends are, now we got to kind of talk like off season and in season, right? Because if you're dealing in, say the competition is far enough away, it doesn't matter. Then the weekends are focusing on the events that you suck at.
Yes. So because I left North Carolina at the end of 2021, when I was still training with my team, if I wasn't currently in prep, what other people were in prep for, if that was a deficiency for me, I would do what they were doing. I would do that event. But if I was in prep, obviously, whatever I needed to do was the centerfold. And then now that I'm training by myself in Virginia, away from my team, I'm working on my deficiencies. My coach and I are like, okay, what can we tackle? Because we don't have something happening right now. And if there was something I made a mistake on at the last show, we're focusing on that again. Whether it was a mistake that was just an accident or I actually need to grow in that deficiency, we're working on that.
Okay.
We're always working on my footwork, especially after breaking my leg, because my speed suffered so much more after that. So we're always trying to grow my moving events wherever we can. But off season, on season, it just depends on, I guess, who I'm with and who currently needs to train what at the time or deficiencies.
So if you're getting more into that in season, does it become more specific to, because you really never really kind of know the events, but you kind of know.
Usually in strongman, you usually know 3 months in advance. And I like to do 12-week cycles. My coach thinks, well, he prefers to put me through 8-week cycles. So the first 4 weeks, he'll pretend like he's putting me through the cycle. And I know that because he's told me this too. Those first 4 weeks, I put too much pressure on myself and I try to go too hard, too fast. And he's realized that if we put the pedal to the metal in the 8 weeks, I perform better. I don't burn out before the competition arrives. So, I'm sorry.
Well, just how it changes as the competition comes in, because as soon as you know what those events are, and what is it, 5 to 7?
Yes. So once we know what those events are, if we'll figure out, does the week breakdown need to change?
Yeah.
Like, I like to squat and then do stones. If we don't have stones in the show at all, do we need to trade the stones out for a different movement right now? Would something else make sense? And then he also takes into account when I can get to certain gyms, because I go to 3 different gyms, and then I have my own garage gym. And there's something different at each location. So we'll play with that as well. But we're really building in a 12-week period. You know the events, you usually know the weights, but you might not know the specific rules, because strongman rules can change all the time. You'll have
that day.
You can have the same event at a different show with a different what's considered a squat, for example, and stuff like that. So we try to have it all pieced together at the beginning of our 12 weeks and spend those first 4 weeks familiarizing, getting comfortable, finding areas of issue, that sort of thing. Closer to the competition, I like to run a comp run through, and I take those very seriously. We pretend like my boyfriend or my coach is the judge. If I make a mistake, that's it. You don't get to do it again. That was your event. You messed up. How can you do better? What won't you do at the show? Those sorts of things. So it's definitely a lot more structured and planned out. And that,
now, if it's an event that you're very proficient at, is it put in less during that time period? Because there's recovery and energy demand, right? So if there's 7 events, but then you still have all the other strength work, conditioning work you have to do, that's a lot.
Yeah. If we're talking 7 events, I train 4 days a week. You can probably fit 1, 2, 3 in during the week, and then 3 on the weekend, because 3 is usually pretty taxing. So if there's one that I'm more proficient at, that one can trade out. Or if there are 2 that are pretty similar, like maybe there's a farmer's carry and a frame carry, we're going to cycle back and forth.
Got it.
So we do rotate things, but it's always an open communication of what I would prefer to do. And he takes that into account and we work together. So if I'm like, hey, this week, I'm really having a hard time with yoke. He's like, all right, well, we can yoke more this week. If you need to get out of your head and get under that yoke more, like, let's do that. And I think that's a really important thing that a lot of coaches don't always do, is get that personal feedback.
So if that is that situation, then that yoke could be problematic for 2 reasons, right? The technical aspect or the physical aspect. If it's a technical aspect, is it going to be lighter, for more volume, just to kind of work on? Some of this is just obvious. I'm just throwing it out there so people would know.
Right.
Because I've seen mistakes made on the other end. Almost always the mistakes are made on the other end.
Yeah.
Because it's strongman.
I'll just do it heavy all the time and I'll get better at it.
Yeah.
No.
And if the technique is off, you're just reinforcing that poor technique.
Yes. And the fun thing about strongman, so if we're talking about the yoke specifically, they bring the car yokes out to Worlds or World's Strongest Man, and those cars are they're long. Yokes aren't long usually. So the cars have more rock to them. And when you're training for that, there's so many fun ways you can change your yoke. You can front load the yoke so it's pulling you forward a little. You can band things to it so it's shaking a little bit more. And the different ways you can build that technique and stability is just so fun and so fascinating. And it's like,
that's where the conjugate
stuff
kind of approach would come in there. That can get weird though, real quick.
It can,
right?
Especially in the age of influencers having a million ideas.
Yeah. Actually, that brings me back to a question I wanted to ask. So when you first started this and you're in that intermediate phase, I assume you're following people on Instagram to be able to see what they're doing, or are you not?
I was, but I wasn't studying the right people. I wasn't studying the world's strongest man athletes like I should have. I was looking at women who they're not even in the sport still. Like, they had no salt in the game for me to be studying them. it was more of like an ego, like, oh, I need to be like her, when I should have been studying the people who've been to the top, not just the men, but everyone that's been at the top. And I was studying like these low level people. I didn't know better at the time.
How did you come to that conclusion? Because
I think when I started to surpass the people I thought were scary, especially the women, I was like, what am I doing looking at the people, my peers, or the people that have never won anything, don't have salt to the game? What am I doing in this moment? And I started to realize I need to be watching. Like if I'm at the Arnold for something else, I went to the 2020 Arnold where they only let athletes in, and I was there to deadlift on the XPC stage, but I went and sat in the audience for the strongman stage because I could. And I was like, this is the moment I need to be studying them and analyzing these people. They're at the top for a reason. Those are the people to look at, not the people who are walking around the hallway with their little, like, I got an Arnold backpack and I was here for the first time.
And so when you are doing that, what are the things that you're looking at and what are the things that you're studying and looking for? Because there's a difference between being a spectator
Yes.
and being a student.
Yes. So I'm really big about plan Bs because in strongman, I don't know if this would apply as much in powerlifting, and you miss a bench, you're going to come back for it on your second attempt, obviously. But in powerlifting, let's say you need to load sandbags into a wheelbarrow and the one you trained with at home is different from the one on the comp floor. You need to have a mental plan of, if these don't load the same or the wheelbarrow doesn't feel the same, what am I going to do differently? Am I going to grab the handles in a different spot? Am I going to move this? Am I going to load the sandbags a different way? Those sorts of things. So when I'm at these big shows, I'm watching an event and I'm trying to see the different technique abilities and the different thought processes between different athletes. And I'm like, well, he's winning because his transitions were faster. And his transition was faster because he did this 2-second thing or this thing that saved him 2 seconds. So I'm trying to analyze how they're similar and how they're different. But everyone has to keep that thought of, I'm not the same size as Mitchell Hooper. I can't copy Mitchell Hooper when he's doing something. And I might not even be able to copy a female. But if I'm analyzing what works well for them and what doesn't, that helps me go home and test, do I want to carry a sandbag this way or the, I think it's hot dog or hamburger. Which one's faster? Which one can I move faster? How is it different? How's it the same? So I'm just analyzing the little pieces, and I pick favorites sometimes. You know, you pick a favorite athlete and you're like, they're so good at this one thing, and you become obsessed with that one thing that they do that you just can't stop watching. Mm-hmm. And it only helps me want to learn how they're doing it or how I can be more successful like that.
Do you find when you're watching them, do you find commonalities amongst, you know, maybe the first event, you know, as the event goes on, things are going to become more fluid, right? Because it's still all foreign to them. And do you find the commonalities as this moves forward? So say it's 10-person field, right? The first two, unfortunately for them, they got to fuck up and figure it out.
Yeah,
right?
Especially if it's a weird implement.
Yes, but if the other ones are watching and they're paying attention, do you find that they're all kind of doing the same thing that you're talking about?
I think so, especially if you're the athlete, because I've been the athlete who just stares at the competition to see like, well, who's getting the most reps and who's, and people have yelled at me and they're like, stop watching them. Now I'm the athlete that can peek through the curtain and go, okay, those first two people went out there and the floor was slippery, or the stones were more slick, or this is what happens. So I'm going to go out there and I'm not changing my game day plan, but I'm enhancing it by realizing the equipment's different. Because I'm very committed to not changing the actual plan, but there's nothing wrong with saying, okay, we need a little bit more tacky. We need a little bit more. We just need to be faster at this transition. We need to be confident. A lot of that, honestly, I think is confidence. Sometimes you see the first few athletes go out, they mess up because of nerves, the audience, whatever. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to go out there and be tough. I'm going to be a badass and do whatever. It actually, it was, I don't know if you followed the Strongest Man on Earth this year, but they had a misload in the men's overhead implements where the heavier axle was put first. 3 guys go out and they're not doing well. And the 4th athlete's standing at the opening and he's like, can you guys check that? And it was wrong. And they had to fix it because he was analyzing those other athletes, not because he was nervous or, you know, he needed to see who's getting what. He was like, something's wrong. I know these guys are capable of this. Something is going on. So you should always be kind of analyzing.
So what did they do to remedy that moving forward?
Brian Shaw came out, they reweighed it they showed the audience that it was wrong, and then they went to the back and let all, I think it was 16 of the guys, vote what they would like to do.
Yeah.
And they all voted to let those 3 or 4 go at the very end, but they would have to go again.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought they were going to get to skip the first implement because they all made it through the first implement, maybe started on that time, like if they did it in 12 seconds, but they had to go back and just do it again. And
No, what I like about that is they put that in the hands of the competitors.
sometimes I don't like decisions being in the hands of the competitors, but in that one I respected that call. It was just an accident.
Yeah.
Stuff happens.
So what aspects from the military background have helped aid you in the strongman training? Or the strongman discipline? I don't want to say training because it goes well beyond that.
I mean, strongman itself, being committed to a training period builds your resiliency, but the military breaking me down from, you can be better than these wimpy thoughts. You can be tougher than that. If you can finish this, you can finish that. So all of those thoughts have heavily helped my strongman career. But what really helped it was breaking my leg and having to come back and actually coming back stronger than I ever was. A stronger squat, a stronger deadlift, all of those things. And I'm like, oh, it's because I stuck to it. I viewed it as a job that I promised myself I would keep doing.
So in the military, did you learn how to reframe the adversity into more positive? Because when you say breakdown, I understand what that means. It's kind of like basically it's how you brainwash people, right? You just go down to be able to do that. But part of that process coming back up, as I wonder if that reframing comes in, right? Because any negative situation can happen. You're going to respond, a multitude of different ways, right? The first way is always going to be not probably good, but then at some point you're going to say, no, wait a minute, I can't keep thinking this way.
I can't remember where that specific thought started, but I do remember after I had broke my leg at the end of 22, somewhere in 23, because things were doing great. Like, honestly, coming back in recovery, I was on a mental high until I wasn't. Like, it was, really getting back into squatting, really realizing that my technique, I couldn't dip and drive. My knees weren't doing the same things anymore. I started working with a sports psychologist, and one of the most wonderful things she said to me was, you don't have to do these things. You get to do these things. And her giving me that simple cue, I'm like, holy crap. That's so true. So I can't remember when I initially started thinking those things, but I know that just working with a sports psychologist who can sit there and say, all of these things are opportunities. None of these are scary things. Even the military, like, I didn't have to do that. I got to do that, and I accomplished it. And just keeps growing, I guess.
We'll get back into that. So what led to, when you think of when the leg broke, with the event, it was a car yoke, right?
It was a car yoke.
It was car yoke.
Same ones for all strongest men.
Yeah. Well, watching it isn't so bad because the car hides a lot of it. Yeah. So I guess there's a benefit to that.
It's crazy. People have asked me why the car didn't crush me. And I'm like, do you know how a car works? Do you know that if there's a hollowed out center, the car's not going to fall on me? Those are ridiculous. But
was there anything in the training leading up to that, so any injury that you're kind of working through or working around, anything that you can say was a somewhat of a precursor?
The fact that I let a doctor poke into my knee he was attempting to permanently pop a Baker's cyst on the backside of my left meniscus, I think didn't prepare me well for it because my knee stayed swollen going into the competition. It wasn't swollen during the competition, but I wore an extra knee wrap when I didn't need to, just to keep it warm, because at that point I was like, what if my left knee isn't safe now? And, having gone down that way, breaking my opposite leg, part of me does wonder, like, did I do that to myself by choosing to still compete with that mental thought? Kind of, when you're injured, even towards the end of it, like the way my boyfriend views it is you either go out there and you give it 100% or you don't go out at all. Yeah. And maybe I went out there and didn't give it 100%. Maybe I mentally was thinking about my knee. I have no idea.
That's a good point. Actually, that's a really good point. Because it's really great advice too, because I'm not saying that's why, right? Because nobody can definitively prove
I think
that.
I stepped out too far.
But
I was excited.
If you're injured and in most strength events, by the time you get to the competition, there's something going to be a little off. It's just the nature of the beast. And if you're gun shy about it, you know, it's going to hurt your performance 100%.
Yeah.
You know, to where if you just embrace it, like, fuck it, you know, if it happens, it happens, but it's going to happen at full speed. It kind of when I remember when, and now rules have changed in football as well, but you know, I was always taught you need to hit as hard as you possibly can the other player, because if you don't and they're hitting harder, you're the one that's going to get the shit knocked out of you because of that. So you just got to go all, no matter if it hurts or doesn't hurt, you got to go all through that thing. So after it happened, what event number was that?
It was the 5th event of 7. So it was finals, and we had cut down to the top 10 women, and that was the first event of the top 10.
Yeah. So as soon as it happens, what goes through your brain?
Like, my world had shattered, honestly. I mean, other people have heard this story, and I'm hoping we don't go down the exact same road that other people have heard me talk about it, but it was the 5th event. I had a 10-point lead in first. In 2021, I had competed at the same show, but because I had just earned my pro card in 2021, when I went to Worlds that year, I was cocky and I was complacent, and I was not mentally on top of it. Fast forward to 2022, I had never seen myself so mentally lasered in. I don't even think I'm there again, but I was the best athlete I had ever been going into that show. So going down, I heard it, didn't feel it, thank God, but I knew something was wrong. It was just something my body told me was wrong, and I instantly felt like I was alone and terrified and that my world was over. And I'm screaming, and everyone thought it was because of the pain, but it was because I knew whatever just happened is taking away my chance at my first world title. And it gutted me. I mean, thankfully I didn't have to go through the pain until they reset my leg at the hospital later, and that was a lovely wake-up call.
Well, how was that? What was the time period? I mean, what was that process? So you go down, then, you know,
they wouldn't let me stay because I wanted to see the last 2 events. I wanted to now see who was going to get crowned.
Now, was it exposed? I mean,
No, because the yoke stops the car, thankfully never left my body. I couldn't even see it.
Okay.
From my perspective, I didn't understand. I kind of blacked out as I sat down. I come to, my boyfriend's in the car already. There are people trying to pull me out, and they're all, you know, in a chaos, and I'm like, stop.
So in your brain, it's like, this is going to hurt. It's not going to hurt any worse. Wrap the shit up. Let me finish watching this. Then we'll
I'm like, I was like, I'm not even in pain. Why can't I stay?
Okay.
And their concern now at that point was they could see my bone was completely twisted, like not twisted and pointing out because it was so broken. They're like, you're going to have a heart attack. So they're rushing me to the ambulance so they can get me hooked up to the monitors to see if I am going into a heart attack. And I wasn't, which was crazy because they're saying I have all the signs leading into a heart attack, being in shock at that moment. And I'm like, I'm fine.
It sounds like you were more pissed than shocked.
Yeah, it didn't help that as they loaded me onto the stretcher, I look at the first EMT and I'm like, do you think it's broken? And she's like, I don't have x-ray vision. And I was like, oh my God. Thankfully, my boyfriend was standing right there, and he looks at me and he's just like, yeah, we're not dealing with her.
And where were you at this time?
I was still on the side of the field.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tate, Florida.
Okay.
There had been a hurricane that year. It went from a 3-day show to a 2-day show. The volunteers were overworked. The athletes were crushing 7 events into 2 days now. There was a lot of factors going on, a lot of things. And then when they went to give me fentanyl, I didn't have enough knowledge of fentanyl at this time. I thought she was joking because all I knew was that it was a drug on the street that people were getting addicted to, met with another rude comment. I'm like, can somebody else take care of me? Like, these people are not the people I want to spend the day with.
Now, was this still at the event?
Yeah, this was on the side of the field as they're getting the ambulance around the building or whatever. Thankfully, the techs that took me to the hospital were so much nicer. And they were like, how is the event going? Tell me about the competition. You know, they cared and they wanted to talk to me. And then I got stuck at the hospital waiting for so long. I want to say it was like 3 hours before they finally got the x-ray back to me. And I'm laughing when they bring the machine over. And she's like, oh, I don't think this is your leg. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, well, you're laughing. And I'm looking at a broken tib fib. I was like, that's me. That's my leg. That's my name right there. And she's like, but you're laughing. I'm like, I'm not in pain. And then they conscious sedated me. And I woke up in the worst pain of my life.
After they said it? Okay.
My boyfriend watched from the hallway and he said I fought them the whole time.
Interesting, right? Because they're giving you the fentanyl, but you really don't need it because you're not in the pain.
Right.
Right.
I think their thought was the pain's going to hit eventually. So if
Sure.
we can curb it.
Yeah.
And I started feeling the silliness from the drugs, but I still wasn't feeling my legs. So that made me giggle more. One of the doctors was like, well, maybe you just twisted your knee. And I latched onto that idea so fast. I was like, yeah, I twisted my knee. They kind of show me the x-ray and I'm like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
my world is over.
So that they set it, casted it.
No,
What did they do after
they set it, sent me up to a room. And then the next morning they sent me into surgery. So they bent my knee and put a rod through the tib. So they fixed the fib, because it's the smaller bone, back together manually and didn't do anything with it because they knew it was going to grow back. And then they put a rod and screwed it into my tib and left it there. It's still there.
Now, did they tell you at that time if they wanted to remove the rod later, or is it there forever? I've heard different cases.
From my understanding, it's there forever unless the screws in my leg become loose. So there's 4 screws. There's 2 at the top and 2 at the bottom. If those ever come loose, I'm told a few different things could happen. They might be able to take out the screws and leave the rod. They might have to go in and take everything out and hope that the bone's sturdy. Honestly, I would prefer if it stays because I mentally feel like I have an advantage having a rod now.
Sure. I mean, the bone grows
right
through.
I know somebody that's had a similar injury and he re-broke his tib with the rod in because a stone rolled rolled back towards his shin.
Well, that's a little different.
Yeah, that was more of a fracture.
Yeah. I mean, that's not force.
Right. You know? I view it as a different.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a complete freak accident type thing.
Yes. I mean, mine was a freak accident.
Yeah.
And that's all I chalked it up to. Everyone was like, oh, it was this. Oh, it was that. I'm like, it doesn't really matter what it was at this point. Like, how do we move forward?
Yeah.
I don't want to get stuck on the whose fault. It's nobody's fault but my own. Nobody did anything to me. It wasn't the car's fault. I'm actually facing the car again for the first time this December. They were supposed to have it 3 years in a row and they didn't bring it back the next year. And I was like, is that because of me?
Yeah.
And now they're bringing it back this year.
So how did you go about your training after it was set?
So I was back in the gym, I think, because this was November. So you got the holiday season. I didn't have a ride to the gym until like 3 weeks in because my boyfriend had to go back to work. So when I was able to go back to the gym, I was like, well, let me sit and let me see what I could do on the floor. So I would do upper body things and just try to be around positive people. Because at that point, I was still in such a positive place. I was like, I'm going to come back from this. I'm going to be great. This is going to be fine. And as I started walking in a boot at 4 weeks, got the boot, kind of got rid of the boot at like 7 or 8 weeks. But there were times where if I knew I was going to be in a more crowded space, like if I was working competition, I'm like, I'm going to put the boot on, wear that. And I realized that I had to bring more things into my training. Like I had to see my chiropractor, which is my dad, way more because my hips were so messed up. I didn't know they made levelers that you could put on your opposite shoe.
Yeah.
Nobody told me about that. Like, what the heck? But there was so much outpouring love from the community. Andrew Clayton actually had sent me he sent me one of Tim Grover's books. And that got me hooked on reading motivational, inspirational stuff, but not from the perspective of motivation's everything, but from the perspective of you can handle these hard things if you take on these hard things. So it was just piece by piece, and some things took longer to get back. My squatting, my yoke, my ability to dip and drive. My squatting was really funny. Honestly, for a while, I didn't realize I was so canted to the left until my left hip flexor was screaming. And we realized we had to dial it back and do some unilateral work and build that right leg back up because I lost so much muscle in that leg in just a month's time. It was like a little pole compared to a thick thigh. It's all taken in stride. I got in the pool more. I couldn't run. I couldn't do any cardio. My college had a pool, so I was in the pool way more. We were trying to constantly tackle things before they became massive problems. And it wasn't a perfect system. Like my coach sometimes would be like, I haven't dealt with this before. You have to be as honest with me as possible. Like he was even like, if you want to fire me, fire me. I was like, I don't want to fire you. I gotta do this.
No, you figure it out.
Yeah. He was just nervous to feel like it was all on him responsibility wise. And I knew that. So I kept trying to tell him like, let's do this together. Let's find the resources, find other people who've been through this and see what we can develop together. And I feel like we did a really good job.
So when you were in the boot, were you able to do any standing overhead work lighter?
only if I took the boot off. And some of that was a fear thing. Like I could stand and press, but my brain was like, are you sure? What if you fall over? What if this happens? So there were these mental things I would have to start saying out loud to the people around me to logically go like, oh, that's not the case. Or my friends would be like, why don't I just stand behind you then? Like, you're not even walking in,
Yeah.
but let me get behind you.
Well, that's why I'm asking, is because there's that mental component that plays into this whole thing too. And for me personally, with what we got to choose our words carefully, right? Because we're not physical therapy. And with anything I've ever had to deal with, it's like the sooner I can start to deal with the mental aspect, you know, if it's a hip replacement or whatever it is, as soon as I can get a bar on my back and sit down on a 30-inch box, it doesn't matter.
Yes.
Right. And stand back up, and you're slow, you're timid, you know, you want to keep all on the muscle, you don't want it to go anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
It's easier to deal with that with 65 pounds than 400 pounds.
Yes.
You know, and that's why I asked about that standing overhead. Even if it's just the bar and you're standing there, then you're building that confidence that this still isn't healed, but it didn't break.
Yeah. And I knew that because my dad being a chiropractor and us, I butt heads. My physical therapist thought I was assigned, and I butt heads so much at first. But with everyone around me knowing that blood flow is more important, like that age old, like just rest and let it, like we knew that wasn't the case. We knew as much as I could move my body, the muscle memory would return. And I even started going back to Planet Fitness because I realized, okay, I can't load any weight. I can't walk around with a 45-pound plate. But if I go back to Planet Fitness where they have all of the cables, all of this, I can go up to each piece of equipment and see what static things I can do safely without feeling like I have to ask for help every 5 minutes. So like, yes, all of those things were huge confidence builders, but knowing that the blood flow was healing was a massive confidence builder because I'm like, yeah, I'm doing the tough stuff.
Like, especially with all the machines. I mean, you got the hip adduction. There's a lot of leg work that you can do.
Being able to do
anything.
I say leg work because I would try to do a single leg kick and I'm like, oh my God, I can't do that. Okay, that hurt. It doesn't help that where the bone broke is right where most extension machines sit on your shin.
Wow,
so it would just sting a lot of the time. And if I start putting more work into my left leg, I go, oh, okay, I'm making my left leg work harder, and that's going to cause more issues. Like a lot of self-check of my ego and what was happening had to be done constantly.
How long did it take until your training could become normalized?
I was able to deadlift 315 again by March, and that was insane because I was doing small static things. We were trying to work in movements. Like, it's hard to do when you can't find a really light sandbag or a really light yoke. So we would try things like just standing under the yoke or taking a step or two. But gosh, where did I start this point?
Well, where training becomes somewhat normalized.
Yes. So in March, I was able to deadlift 315 again. And then about 2 months later, I was able to pull in the fours again. So my static training was there by March, and that was wonderful. But that was also the time when we were starting to realize by May, oh, my squat, oh, my yoke, oh, the way I run, the way my Achilles works, like these little things need way more attention. So that summer really got spent on where are the deficiencies, what are the issues. So we would play with different things to see how good or bad they were, because there's so many different events in strongman. We would try to see what I couldn't do and what I could do and take all the things I couldn't do and break them down piece by piece.
So you had to regress it?
Yes.
Tremendously, because to get the steps right.
Which is what killed me mentally, because I'm like, oh, I'm making all this progress. And then my left hip flexor starts hurting, and I'm like, I'm squatting so poorly. And I start to get down on myself, and I'm like, I'm never going to be good again. I'm never going to be strong again. And that's when the dark days really start to settle in. Like, I had some dark days at the beginning, especially after my boyfriend went back to work, because I knew he had to, but like there would be days where I would have to get myself to the kitchen with the walker just to microwave something, and standing up for that long would send all this pain down my leg. And I'm like, okay, but if I can get past that, you make all this progress, and then you realize you have to take step backs. It's really, really hard, especially for someone who views themselves as was at the top of their game.
Yeah.
Like, how the heck do I get there if we keep having to take steps back?
But wasn't that a little bit easier because it's more of a gait? You know, it's a gait thing, and a stability thing than it is a strength thing. While it sucks, but in your brain, it's fixable. But the only way it's fixable is you're going to have to take a lot of weight off the bar.
Yeah. And I mean, at that time, it was the summer of 23. And my thought was, I would like to be back on the world stage by the end of this year winning.
Or the timetable.
Yeah. So I'm putting this pressure on myself if I have to be here by the end of the year, but I can't do that if we keep taking step backs. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I ended up there because we took all those steps backward and we grew.
Mm-hmm.
I allowed myself to swallow that ego. And gosh, we worked with so many different people, different massages, different physical therapy options. Oh my gosh, dry needling, the pool, different ways of getting cardio in, different ways of just building who I could be again. And the mental piece was a huge part. That's why I had to bring in the sports psychologist, because she was able to figure out why I was stuck in certain mental thoughts and find ways to bring me out of them. And I still talk to her.
With all those modalities, were there any, this is a kind of a loaded question, and were there any of those that you felt worked better than others? And it's a loaded question because if you mentally are not really where it needs to be, you're not going to know anyhow because
you're
not fully committed.
I mean, the physical,
because you can go down that path, right? So you got dry needling, you have, oh my God, ultrasound, red light therapy.
Yes. I mean, I got PRP, broke my knees twice.
Stem cell. There's
amazing.
Zillion things. Were there any that you thought really, they all matter because they all add up, because it's all keeping your mind occupied on, even if it's like the pool after a certain point probably isn't going to really help a whole lot, but in your mind, you're moving forward because you're actually doing the thing. You're doing something. I
mean, I would put the sports psychologist up there, my dad being a chiropractor and being easily accessible.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I was telling him my hips this, my hip, he knew, oh, it's because you're walking funny. It's because you're catering this side, and he would adjust me. And that's, a money saver, having someone in your family and being able to do it. But the pool honestly was a godsend. Realizing that my college had a pool, I'm like, I've never taken advantage of this. So I would go before class and I would swim, and I was boosting my cardiovascular endurance. I was seeing how many laps I could get while holding my breath, how far I could get holding my breath. And I was like, I'm not only getting more comfortable stretching and getting range of motion under the water, I'm building my moving events by being able to breathe better.
Did you swim when you were younger and doing all the running and the cardio stuff?
I've always been a great swimmer. So I wasn't a competitive swimmer, but I was a swimmer my whole life, and I've always been good at it.
So how was that with more muscle though?
Heavy. Tell you what, heavy. My last semester of college, I needed to fill my credits. So I took a 1 credit learn to swim class.
Yeah.
And they would put us through these different little scenarios. And sometimes I would be faster than the other people, but that was because of my cardiovascular endurance. Whereas if we were doing like a floating thing, I'm like, I am so heavy. I am so dense. And they're like, oh, Nancy, you need to float like this. I'm like, I can't float like that because I'm heavier than everybody when I was. These are like 18-year-old kids. You're about $140. I'm $175. Like, it'll work.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I swam when I was a kid, but I remember decades later when I'm a heavier power lifter and I don't know, we went on a vacation somewhere and it's like, let's just jump out and we'll swim to the beach. I'm like, fuck.
First it's your upper back, then it's your hips, your quads. You're like, oh my gosh, this is hard.
Yeah, give me the fucking life jacket and 2 floaters, something. Yes. Yeah, just if we had to keep from doing all that. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, because I know a lot of people get discouraged, and I've talked to a lot of people who have found me on Instagram because of this injury. They've had a similar injury, and they're like, well, I can't afford this or I can't afford that. And I'm like, you're right. I had an advantage having a dad who's a chiropractor and having access to a pool for free. But I don't think people look at the resources that might be readily available to you enough. And even if that's just asking other people how they did something or how they gained access to something, just finding ways to monopolize all these resources without spending $1 million as a regular person.
Well, I can kind of throw that back too and say, even if your father wasn't a chiropractor, you would have figured it out.
I don't know. I used to not like adjustments.
Well, I know that you would have found another path.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because with gait, anytime you break anything or hip replacement, knee replacement, the first and most important thing is to get your gait back. And everybody wants to skip that. Everybody.
Yeah, it's their game day.
Right. But if you watch, if they don't do that, you see that slight kick out.
Yeah.
You know, basically a limp for life.
Yeah.
Right.
If I'm not careful with how I run yoke, it'll start to look like that. And I'll feel it. And I'm like, okay, we got to back to square one for this training session, essentially. Working out into it.
So my point is everybody can watch themselves walk in a mirror and see if their gait is on point.
Yes.
And if it's not, walk slower and think it through.
Yes.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
No, I know. I've been down the same road though.
Oh, I know you have, because you had both hips.
Both
right?
hips, right? So
two different.
Yeah, and that was for me. That was like, this is priority one. You know, make sure that the gait is good.
Yes.
You know, because I don't want to have to limp the rest of my life. But it wasn't so much that is, if I have to kick that out, then you're going to see the issues that you kind of ran into. Now you got a fucked up psoas, or, you know, your erector's all jacked up, because anytime you do anything heavy, there's going to be that compensation in there, which could have been addressed right from the beginning, you know, because that you kind of learn how to walk. You have to learn how to walk again.
I didn't get to do that with my physical therapist, though. Because it was an out-of-state surgery, we were still in Florida. They did the surgery in Florida. I went back to Virginia. It was an awful time trying to convince them that what had happened, because I'm only sending them photos from my phone. I didn't have the records yet to pass over.
Mm-hmm.
My doctors are like, it's not that we don't believe you. We just can't use a cell phone image to move this process along. We need the records from that hospital. I don't think I started physical therapy till like 3 months in. So I was doing all these things kind of not on my own, but like with my small community. And it was pretty tough. My physical therapist tried to tell me, you don't need to run, you don't need to jump. And I was like, what if there's an emergency? I would like to be able to run. And over time, he started to realize that I was challenging him because I really meant what I said when I first met him. He was like, I didn't take you seriously at first. I'm sorry. And he finally grew with me. And at the end, he was like, I was supposed to discharge you months ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I think he enjoyed the new challenge because he was so used to working with old veterans that only need to get up out of the chair, get into their car. They don't need the things I needed. So I was essentially challenging the work he was used to doing. And he was like, oh, I got to work harder with this girl. Like, yeah, you do, because I need to run again.
Sure. And if they love their profession, they're going to love that.
Yes.
Right. The same way if you have a client, you know, that's got this, you got to look really hard to figure out what the weak point is to make them better. And it's awesome, right? Because it's normally not the case with most people.
Right.
It's just glaring.
Little experiment.
Yeah. It's like, okay, yeah, now we got to figure this nuance thing out.
Yes.
And you're going to fail several times before. Then, you know, that's the best people to train.
And when it finally gets better, it's so much more meaningful because of all the failures. You're like, okay, finally, like it worked.
So with that second dark period, you said you brought in a sports psychologist. What was that? Where did you start with that? Or where did you guys start with that?
I mean, when I first started with her, I was like, I don't need help. I know how to be tough. I know in 2022, I was this, I was that. And she was like, okay, but you're not right now. Why? Like, tell me. She really had to get me to talk about myself in a way I didn't want to. She wanted me to be vulnerable with her. And that was so hard for me. So just allowing myself to be vulnerable, she was able to dissect and go, okay, you're building up these mental fears. You're deciding these things are now terrifying. And kind of like when someone has a phobia, she's like, we need to get you back to that yoke. We need to get you to face those things. And not knowing what the 2023 Worlds events were at the time when I first started working with her, she was thinking, okay, we could build up your mindset as tough as we want. And you might not have a chance to touch that car. If they put the car in the show this year and you get to the show, what if you get inside that car and you get into a terrified moment? Thankfully, we didn't have the car that year, but now that we know it's going to be in this year, we're trying to train as close to the car as possible. We're going to go try and get under the car at the promoter's house if I can, and put myself in those places so that if we're back under the car again, I'm not like, oh God, like, is it going to happen again?
Did you kind of feel, because that sounds really familiar to going into the military and being broken down, where in a different
it was
type of way, was that the same thing that was kind of happening, is breaking it all the way down to build it back up?
Yeah, I mean, I would get in front of a log, and before, log was like my bread and butter.
Yeah.
It was something I never had issues with. I was always performing at my best, and she helped me build this mantra of, I'm strong, I'm confident, I've done this before, I can do it again. So just talking to myself, she really pushed the self-talk. She's like, I don't care if you say it out loud. I don't care if other people hear you. But if you need to look at yourself before you do an event and say, I've done this before, I'm not scared of it, do it.
Well, the interesting thing that you said to me was she was questioning you on why. Like,
Yeah.
Which is taking that to that other level
That
because,
imposter syndrome.
yeah, because with adversity, I mean, we've always heard, people don't change until they hit an absolute low, right? And I don't know if that's necessarily has to be true.
Right.
Right. But you need to get yourself to a low enough point to understand why you're at that low enough point to be able to make the changes, to be able to kind of move forward.
Yes.
And if she's having that conversation with you and you're like here, she's saying you need to be here before we can get.
Right. She made me go through the trauma and talk about it. And I was like, I don't want to explain it. And she's like, we need to. You need to talk me through the whole event. And I started watching the video more. And people would get freaked out when I would share updates because sometimes I would share the video again on social media. And I'm like, look, I'm not sharing this to upset people. I'm sharing it because it helps me. And based off the few people who've already reached out to me with similar injuries, I know if we're talking about these things more, it's helping each other. So that's what I'm going to do. And the more I watch the video, the less it affected me.
Mm-hmm.
There's some guys who they blow both their quads and they're like, I've never seen the video. I'm like, I find those videos powerful. Like having the sleeves, my Elite FTS sleeves that they cut off. I put them in my garage gym with a picture of the broken tib fib and a little note on it. And that was my motivating factor when I squatted. I was like, look at these things, address these things and own them.
Is that something she helped you to be able to do? Because that's reframing at the ultimate peak.
Watching the video and putting the knee sleeves up was kind of my own take of it. Like she was more in the affirmations and self-talk and facing your problems. But I realized that facing my problem was watching the video, looking at what went wrong, looking at how, just like watching any film. How did that squat go wrong? How did this go wrong? How can I fix it? So seeing those things, unfortunately, you can't, like you said, you can't see everything in it because of the car. I wish I could have seen my hips in that moment. That's the one thing I wish I could see, but those things are helpful. As hard as they can be at first, you get over it better and you face it.
My brain just went like in cold left field because I'm wondering now, as AI keeps advancing, if there's a way that we can remove the car and actually see. Which seems like it could be a possibility.
I bet.
That would
probably. I mean, when I worked the 2023 Shot Classic, there was a vendor there that had brought these pressure plates, and I'm now half a year into recovery, and they're like, we want to have you do
that's fine.
An air jump or jump squat and land on the pressure plates, and they were still able to see that my left leg was producing more pressure than my right leg. I was like, this is so cool. So yeah, if we could see my hips in that moment, that would have been some pretty cool technology. Just don't know if it's there yet.
When you're squatting or doing anything at this point that's, unilateral, are you still conscious of, are you applying the same amount of force through each leg?
Yes. And part of that is knowing that some movements, like squatting specifically, I need to do air squats first. I need to pick a spot on the wall, especially if there's not a mirror, and I need to know where I'm aligning myself. I need to pay attention to my foot placements more. I can't just do my 1-2 step out like I used to, because sometimes I'll step out way further and not be even. But with other movements, I don't even think about it now. Like I hardly think about my legs sometimes. I'll see people I haven't seen. I went out to Norway where I broke the world record, and one of the promoters out there was like, how's your leg? I was like, what are you talking about? My leg's fine. And he was like, I was the lane judge when you went down. I'm like, oh my God. So you have your own trauma. And he's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just taking those things in stride, but it's usually not a massive thought for me anymore.
What were some of the other takeaways that you had with working with sports psychologists that you still use today?
Being able to take my experience and positively give back to a community that's done so much for me was something we talked about a lot. I didn't compete for 8 months, and my first comp back was a local show just to get my feet wet. But I was working every competition I could get my hands on because I realized that giving back to the community, well, it helps grow the community, but it gives me another piece of involvement. It lets me see how promoters run things, how judges run things, how it impacts me as a future athlete. And now I balance my time between giving back, commentating, judging, volunteering where I can. And it's helped me meet so many people. Just working the Shaw Classic in 2023, they let me speak for an hour in the expo. And my crowd was smaller than Nick Best, than Ed Cohen's. Sure, got that. I knew that was going to happen, but it was an intimate crowd. And so many people there, not so many, like maybe 10, stuck around afterwards, got in line, and they each wanted to tell me their unique injury and how my story has impacted them. And it broke me down in the most beautiful way. Because I couldn't appreciate my awful story helping other people until those people really told me what it did for them.
No, that's really cool because a lot of those people may have just quit.
If I was a different athlete, if I was new to the sport, I wouldn't have stayed. But as they were loading me on the stretcher, I'm like, okay, maybe I won't do the Arnold. This is November. I'm looking at my boyfriend, I'm like, maybe I won't do the Arnold. Maybe and he's like, okay, you can't see it right now, but he's like, you're not doing the Arnold. Like, I'm already talking about competitions on the stretcher. He's like, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Because I was such a mentally tough athlete at that point, and I knew who I was and what I wanted out of the sport. And I came back for it a year later, and I achieved it. And it was hard, but it was so worth it. And I made so many mistakes in that 2023 show too. But making those mistakes and still accomplishing the world title, I guess, made it sweeter because I messed up. It's like I missed my world record attempt in April, and then I succeeded in June by accident.
How by accident?
So I actually went out to Ireland.
Broke a world record by accident.
I'm not kidding. I went out to Ireland just to break a stone world record in April. Didn't make it. However, in June, I went out to Norway for FIFR Power Week. All stones, all fun stuff. Our last stone of a stone series was supposed to be 150 kilograms. I go out, I load it, and I'm watching the video back, and I hear the announcer go, 160 kilograms. I'm like, no freaking way. Because at that point, I already knew that was the world record I'd been going for. So they went, they weighed it, they did all the verifications. Once I told them, I was like, if that's the case, and I was the only person to finish that series. So, it was accidental. I think that's why it was such an amazing thing. Well, it was amazing because I had failed it 2 months prior, but it was also amazing not spending the week fretting over a world record, not spending the morning thinking, am I going to get it? Like, is this going to happen?
Yeah.
I just went out, picked up a stone, loaded it. Like, there was so much power in not knowing that it was 10, 11 kilograms heavier.
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons to be learned there. Right?
Yeah, I was like 150 kilograms. I've done that. That's about 330. I can do that. But it was about 355.4.
Yeah. Wow, that can mess with your head afterwards in a lot of different ways.
Yes. I'm going to attempt to break my world record again in January, and I can only imagine.
You have to not care about it, right? It's like, like, how can I not give a shit about this or even think about it?
Right. And that's like going into that state of
flow.
That intense state you can put yourself in where nothing matters, but you're so laser focused and you're so excited, but you also, I'm sure you felt squats or deadlifts where you didn't feel it. And it was a PR. And you were like, I'm a god.
Oh, yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, and that's where you want to be I guess I would explain it as true confidence. You know, some people might need ammonia, some people might need slaps, everybody's a little bit different, but you can tell. Like for me, if it's a squat, I've seen tons of squats. You can tell as soon as they take it out. You can see.
Oh, especially with a squat. If you have oh crap, it's heavy.
Yeah.
Not going to go well.
Yeah.
But if you have oh, here we go.
Yeah. And then it feels in slow motion and you're able to make corrections if you feel a little bit, the tension's not in the right place.
Yeah.
You know, it's odd when you think back on those things because it's just a few seconds, but in your brain, you can remember. I remember at this point I had to do this. And at this point it felt a little shifty. I had to do this.
And it felt like a full minute to you and you watch it back and it's 2 seconds.
Yeah. So how was that first meet or first show coming back that you said you used to just kind of get your feet wet?
It was a local show and it was fun and easy. However, after each event, and I love this about my boyfriend because he can look at something and go, you're sandbagging that. You're not trying. And after the first event, it was a clean every rep, max rep event for an axle. And he shows me the video and he's like, look how long you pause each time you get it to your chest. And I would get it to my chest and I would go, and I wasn't having reload and pushing. I wasn't performing the way I should be. And I was like, okay, we can use this data because I was doing better in the gym. But then come that local comp, I was being a little cautious and a little nervous on some things. And he was like, you need to be intense again. You need to build back this intensity. And my coach is the same way. He's like, we need to get faster. Like my coach was more focused that I had won and I had a good day. But both of them later were like, okay, we need to address the little things.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, winning is cool, but even when you're winning, you need to address stuff. You always need to address stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of how to explain, like you can go through, so you're doing EMOM or whatever it is, right? And you got 10 of them that you have to do. You kind of, maybe after 5, you realize, you know what, I'm not even really fucking trying at this point.
Yep.
Right. And then you kick it in that other gear. And then maybe it's the last one and you kick it in the other gear. And then it's good and bad, right? Because it's good because you're like, hell yeah, I'm way stronger than this, but I sandbagged all this other stuff. I wasn't really trying. But when you're away from that for a period of time, then that will happen.
Yes. And it doesn't help that people around you, and this is not from a bad place, this comes from a place of love, but they'll try to say like, oh, it's okay. Oh, no, you did a good job. Like they're just trying to give you all this encouragement. But you need those people like my coach and my boyfriend who can say, can you try harder? Can you work harder? And they'll actually hold you accountable again. They realize who you are and they know you're still that person. And they're like, no, that doesn't cut it. Like, I want to say 6 months into my recovery was where I was having that talk with myself where I was like, I need to kick some stuff into high gear. I'm still pretending like I'm in this hurt place when I'm not. I want to get past this. I need to kick myself back into high gear. And if you have too many people that are like, oh, you don't have to if you don't want to, you just broke your leg. Like, again, from a place of love, but it's not the most productive to build back a world champion.
Yeah.
You need to be tough.
Yes. With, oh man, I know what it was now. Because you said that you got into, helping at the events, kind of promoting, not promoting, but the way that I kind of see that, it's like the Wizard of Oz, right? You finally get to see behind the curtain.
Yes.
And sometimes that's not really a good thing, because it's not what you think, so it's a lot of strength athletes. I purposely tell them like, don't do that, until you're ready to like, just only do that. Like, don't do that because you're not going to like what you're going to see.
It's a hard balance, but taking it back to the Shot Classic, because that was the biggest floor. Like Carrie and Brian had brought me out to commentate with Nick Best on the open classes floor. And having that opportunity, I was like, I can't mess this up. But also, I want to learn from them. That was their 4th Shot Classic at the time. They had built something really wonderful. And I wanted to see their thought process because especially on the women's side, the growth has been slower. And I'm picking Carrie's brain. I'm like, why aren't we doing this? And this and this. And she's explaining things like, well, you can't just mix all these open athletes with the strongest man on earth audience because they pay to see those guys. So if you're making them watch these other things that are really time consuming and not the athletes they're here for, we might lose the interest in that we've brought. So like being able to see how decisions get made and how they are trying to grow the sport for both sides, but you have to wait on some things or you have to mix some things in. So like that year they had brought out the open women during the Strongest Man on Earth show to do an event. And the audience is like, oh, this is crazy. There are girls here. We're like, yeah, it's the other show you didn't buy tickets to.
Mm-hmm.
So I viewed that as a really cool piece of seeing how other things work. But now that I've worked a lot of local shows, sometimes when I'm competing, I'm like, oh, I would have done that differently. I would have done that differently. And I start to make some criticisms. And I'm like, no, I'm here as an athlete right now. Like, just need to focus on the athlete piece.
How have you seen the sport for women change since you've been in it?
It's slower, but it's coming up. When I first started Strongman, women weren't on the Rogue stage the way they are now. So 2 years ago, Rogue took over the pro women's stage at the Arnold, and they shared it with the men. And everyone was getting paid, to my knowledge. First to last place is getting a payout, whereas most Strongman shows us the top 3. And now Rogue's bringing them out to the Invitational in September in Scotland, and they're matching the prize purse of the men. So not only are they all getting paid, but first place woman, same as the first place men. And those things have taken years to get to, but it's happening. And the way we keep making it grow is volunteering the sport, encouraging other people to get into the sport, finding ways to increase prize purses, whether it be sponsors, live streams, whatever. Like some federations don't have it figured out. That's very clear. And they won't last.
Yeah.
But the ones that do, you can see that they're putting women on the forefront. And it sucks because the people who have never worked a show might not see why things are working the way they're working. But they're slow and they're trying. That's the important thing, is that it's growing a lot. Like when I first started, I wouldn't have been able to make much money in the sport. Now we're at a point where if I can get myself on the rogue stage, which might be hard because I'm a smaller athlete, I could make a lot more money. You know, Mitch Hooper's making a lot of money, but he's a male. He's one of those 400-pound gigantor boys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it kind of goes into what you were saying, Carrie was saying as well. I mean, people are paying to see the big,
Yes.
you know.
Yes.
And, but the demographic for the other is also, the higher that one goes, it pulls everything else up.
Yes.
Where and this is maybe outside of Olympic weightlifting, is common in all strength sports, right? Bodybuilding is probably more structured, but powerlifting and strongman, there's federation issues, there's strongman, there's all kinds of bullshit. But if you have enough premier events that are paying, right, and like Shaw Classic would be an example, or the Rogue or whatever federation those fall under, it doesn't mean a damn thing because they build a brand around the name of the show.
Yes.
Right. And that's key, because once they do that, then that prize money can go up from there. And they're in a unique position to be able to say, no, we don't need your federation, or we don't need this. We just want to take care of the athletes and be able to do X, Y, and Z. And it's hard to break that bubble, which strongman has done.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And on the women's side, so if you look at the men's side, 400-pound men are more common to have more equally sized men for a World's Strongest Man type of group than a women's stage. You're not going to have all the ladies even the same height or the same weight. So they have to take more safety concerns and liability thoughts into consideration when they're building a show. Like, who do we bring out here? If we bring out Nancy and she's the smallest athlete and she gets hurt, we're going to look bad. Like, we have to.
Yeah.
I think again, I'm not trying to speak for Rogue, but I think on the women's side, it's just a little bit harder because our body sizes vary so much, and there's so many less equally sized women at the top, and that's just a small piece of it.
So how do you decide what weight you're going to compete at?
I don't know if I ever thought about it in detail, but when I did my first nationals, I weighed 165, and I was like, I can cut to 160. That's fine. It was a small cut. I started cutting way too soon in my athletic career. I don't encourage that for novice people, for sure.
Yeah.
But
let's say that again, by the way. You don't cut unless you have to. No, don't cut unless you're a pro.
Don't cut until you're doing something with high stakes. Like
that's
high prize purse, you know, you meet the criteria. But I started putting on mass, and I usually never get heavier than 175, but I always knew, like, I'm thriving in this 73 kilogram class, which is 160 pounds. And that was when Worlds first came out with that class in 2021. I was like, oh, awesome. Because I didn't feel ready to take on the 82 kilogram class because I wasn't filling it out yet. So I kept competing as the 73, and I kept doing really well, and I can still make the cuts. They're getting a little harder because I've put more mass on. But knowing I can still do the cuts, I'm like, I'm not sizing up yet. And you also have to know what you're willing to do. Am I willing to put on 200 pounds? Am I willing, become 200 pounds and willing to do these things to meet other weight classes? No, not right now. So I'm happy in the 73. So I guess it was kind of by accident, but it happened to work out that 2 years later, they made that class a world level class.
So you're going to allow the cut to basically determine if you're going to go up or not. So when cutting the weight becomes
a bad idea,
really bad.
Yes.
Because it's always going to be bad. But when it becomes really bad, then you'll move up.
It has gotten better since I took on a nutritionist this last year, which I was doing my own nutrition before. We would do my weight cuts, like my coach, my boyfriend, and I. We all knew what we were doing. We were doing the same water load, water drop. Taking on a nutritionist and giving someone else that stress made my last cut so much easier because I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't in charge. And he did a different format, something I had never done, and I just had to trust him. It went well.
What did you change?
How he loaded and cut my water. So
what about all the other outside of all that? Just the daily?
Oh, so
because that's a small. I mean,
the nutrition being dialed in.
Yeah, I mean,
sure.
The cut is definitely a factor, but that factor is determined upon what goes on
Yes.
in the other 51 weeks of the year.
That is very true. I mean, him and my coach had the option to talk to each other if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
We were all on the same page. Instead of me dialing in my nutrition, he was now saying, no, I'm in charge. You're not doing what you want. Because before I would clean up my diet and be 170 before I needed to cut. So I would only be cutting 10 pounds. But his model kept me at 171-ish throughout the year, and I felt stronger. He was feeding me better. He knew what I needed. And then when we got to the cutting period, instead of doing a slow water load and water cut, it was like 72 hours of just insane water load, and my body dumped everything.
Mm-hmm.
I had to take 3 10-minute baths. And I'm somebody who can still cut 5 pounds in my sleep. Like I do almost every night.
Yeah. So before this, were you focusing on your diet 24/7? Or were there months it's just like, whatever, I'm just going to eat and my weight has to stay at a certain point?
No, I like eating on a routine. So I would build my own nutrition plan, but it wasn't really science-based. It was, I'm going to eat these 5 meals a day. I know what I like. I'll do it every day. I'll trade out a protein if I need something different. But when I started working with Matt McKeegan, he was like, you can't eat a Cliff Bar every day. My second meal was a protein shake and a Cliff Bar. He was like, you need to get rid of those. Like, that's processed. We're not going to keep doing that every day. And I think I was doing that second meal because it was easier for me. It was an easy thing to pack in my bag and just go. And he was like, no, we need to do science-based things. We need to eliminate things, try things, switch out things. And I was like, oh, you're right. That's why you're the professional at this.
All right. So it was already pretty sound.
It was sound, but I was winging it, if that makes sense. There wasn't a whole lot of...
Well, compared to others, I would say it's way more sound.
And I mean, I would snack more in the off season because I like to snack with my boyfriend, but like having someone else be in charge and say like, you need to stop doing this holds you accountable in a different way.
Were there any things, outside of the Cliff Bar that were big changes that you noticed immediate differences because of?
Oh my gosh, he brought fruit into my diet. Like, I like fruit. I know that sounds silly.
I know it's funny when you hear things like that because
consistent fruit.
So many people will pick or make fruit a villain.
Yeah, because of sugar. It's the best kind of sugar you can get.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not big on sugary stuff in general. I just wasn't raised that way, so it's not my palate. But him putting consistent melon, pineapples, and I know the pineapple is more about like cleaning out your gut. And then he would give me Rice Krispie treats after a hard training session. And I'm like, you're giving me sugar? And he's like, trust me. And cream of rice being mixed with my protein. I'm like, all of these things feel so anabolic. He's like, because you're eating the right things.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt so silly telling him how I felt the first few months because he knew. He was like, yeah, I know. Like that's the way it's supposed to feel.
And so you saw a difference in your performance. Did you see a difference in your sleep because of that as well?
I don't know. I feel like I had already kind of figured out my sleep. But possibly. Because I had been put on Adderall for my, the results I got from a TBI in the military. It wasn't a cool TBI, it was a silly one. But I had been put on Adderall, and being put on Adderall at the end of 2022 helped me actually expend my energy during the day so that by bedtime, I wasn't restless. I was ready to go to bed. So I think that really...
Yeah, which means you would be a candidate for it because of the people that I know that will use that for other reasons.
Yeah, I mean...
They're not sleeping.
I was having a lot of cognitive issues, and at first they thought it was ADHD, but they put me through a full, deep, like 4-hour cognitive panel on no coffee, nothing that could stimulate me in any way to analyze my brain. And just the result was I was having a lot of cognitive issues because of my brain injury. So they put me on Adderall to help with those side effects, and it made a world of difference. I was like, oh my gosh, I can sleep again. I can wake up like a normal person. I know how to use my energy better.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned something earlier about the 2023 world's kind of being whack, so how was that season? How did that play out? Because that's post-injury.
Like making mistakes?
Yeah.
So
there's a lot going on, right?
Yeah.
There's, coming back from the leg, getting back into the flow.
Yes. There was this piece that, again, this came from people meaning well, but they would say, go get your title. And I kept attaching this pressure to it of everyone expects this now. I can't mess this up. and talking that through with other people and my sports psychologist, I'm realizing, because she's breaking it down for me, she's like, so it's not your world title. We can say that 2022 might have been, but you didn't win it. You didn't finish the show. That's fine. Not yours. It was Hannah's. That's fine. But in 2023, when people say, go get your world title, you need to be able to shake that off and go, nope, it's anyone's title. I'm here to fight for it.
Mm-hmm.
So having to break out of that mental piece was a big deal. The training felt amazing. I felt like I was on top of my game. I was pulling in the fives for the first time in my life, like just doing great stuff. And then I had jammed my thumb like a few weeks before the show. And that helped because it was this small mental distractor of, oh, my thumb hurts. Like it wasn't big enough to affect any events, but it was enough for me to not think about my leg in some of the events that it was a necessary evil. And I loved it. And once I got into the flow of the weekend, I wasn't that scared. Like the first event, I had huge imposter syndrome. I walked out there and I was like, oh, I'm a nobody. Nobody wants me here. I don't belong here. Even though people are still messaging me and they're like, go get your world title. I'm like, it's not my world title. I don't even have a chance this year. And I didn't win the first event like I had expected to. So I was like, okay, we got to focus on the next event. Had to take each event in stride. And honestly, I just kept vomiting all the thoughts I was having onto my boyfriend and my teammates. And they were like, are you okay? Like, stop stressing out so much. And while it was a great prep, it was just a really hard show because I was letting so many mental factors get to me, but I was also able to put some of them aside and go, okay, next event, like let's focus on the next event. Made a mistake. Let's move on. Didn't even win an event till the last event. And I won.
So from what you were saying earlier, you were going into events basically overconfident with ego. Before this that's one, right? So now this one you're going in with, and I'm glad you described imposter syndrome and how it manifested in you.
Yes.
And because it's, some of these words are like weird, you know, it's anxiety, depression, imposter syndrome. Like, what does that mean? You know, it's, if everybody's going to define
everybody.
Yeah. It's like, so it's, I like it when people actually define what those feelings were,
Yes.
you know, to anchor it to some degree. And so now, say with the last Shaw Classic, you have both extremes of how to go in. You know, here's the ego goddess that nobody's going to beat.
Right.
Here's the person that, fuck, I don't even know if I'm supposed to be here. But that worked. And so now you got to figure, so how are you figuring out where that needs to be going into the shows?
Well, in the 23 worlds, I had also realized, because, you know, my coach is my coach, but my boyfriend's like a secondary coach. And they both know that.
Mm-hmm.
I realized in that show, after we finished the Denny Stone event, because everyone's carrying them side to side, my right leg could not stabilize. So I was going between my legs like the old school method. And I messed up my own form in that. And as I'm explaining it to him backstage after the event, he's like, why was I not involved in this part of your training? This is my boyfriend. I'm like, oh, I think maybe I was hiding some thoughts from you because I was scared you were going to try and pull me back from it. So I had to start being more honest with both of them about everything. And then going into this season, I took on a lot. I competed 5 times in 5 months. So by the time I got to the Shaw, it was, let's place top 5 again. Let's prove middleweights can be on an open show. However, at the end of day 1, when the middleweights are at the top of the podium going into day 2, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I had focused my whole summer around this show and had the thought of middleweights could win this show, I might have performed better if I had not taken on so much this summer. Not that I regret taking on stuff, but there were some implement issues, like issues because I wasn't familiar with the piece they brought out on the field, and I made mistakes. I was like, okay, so each of these has to be a learning moment. Like, honestly, I was just hoping to end the summer season strong, and I finished 5th, wasn't stoked about it, but I knew that was the best I had at the moment. I wasn't 100%, but I brought 100% of what I had, and I did my best. And I was pretty confident, pretty happy throughout that whole show, just not as tough as I probably could have been if I hadn't taxed myself out the whole summer. But the summer's been pretty successful overall.
Well, you brought up a very interesting point where I talk to a lot of coaches and I talk to a lot of people that use coaches, right? And there's accountability and responsibility on both ends. And one of the things that you just noted is, you know, had I been more transparent with both of them, the result would have been higher.
Right.
And you work as a coach, I believe, as well, right?
Yeah.
So there's figuring that out, right? Because I don't think any athlete's ever going to be 100% transparent with any coach.
Right.
Right. There's always going to be things, what you talked about was seems like a minor thing, but it's not.
No.
Right. But to you, it was kind of like a minor thing. It's like, it's not worth this conversation over this because whatever, the result's still going to be the same. It's going to be no matter what. But, it can degrade the trust, between the coach and the athlete, because now they're like, what the fuck?
You got the secret.
Yeah. Like I thought we were.
That's a massive thing to know.
Right. And you don't know. So if you were to give, advice to the people that are working with coaches, assuming they've been working with the coach for a while, because there's a caveat there. It takes a while to build that trust, especially if it's online. It's going to take more time. Actually, it takes more time than people think. So my quick advice to be able to throw out there, if you're looking at hiring a coach, vet them harder, contact referrals, take a couple months and then commit for at least a year.
Oh yeah.
Right. Because there's a learning experience, but then find that transparency on both ends. Like the coach has got to figure out and let the athlete know what is and what is not important. And the athlete has to almost, without annoying the shit out of the coach,
just thinking, like not just word vomiting all the time, but knowing, hey, the fact that I haven't gone to the bathroom properly in 3 weeks is probably something your nutritionist needs to know.
Yeah, well, exactly. Right. So it's what are the things that you think most the athletes are leaving out that it's important? Digestion is actually a really good one.
I think digestion is a huge one. My big four, if you're not casually talking about what your life looks like with your coach, and it doesn't need to be all the time, but just hopefully you're doing a weekly check-in and your coach is concerned about you. If they're not, that's a bigger issue. But if you can just say like, hey, this entire week, I'm being sent to this conference and I don't know if I'll have access to a gym. And the coach is like, oh, okay, well, like when you get there, maybe it has a hotel gym. Maybe we could figure something out. Like, I guess it's just really unique to each person, but you need to know how to tell your coach things about your life without overdoing it. And like you said, it comes down to asking the coach, like, what do you want to know? What do you want to hear from me? Do you want to know about my work schedule? Do you want to know about my sleep cycle? Do you want to know if I'm on a new medication? You should be having those conversations about what you expect from each other. When you first start working together, it should be, what do you expect from each other from the get-go?
Well,
then as you grow.
It's interesting, though, because and when you start, and if it's a beginner or intermediate, it really is more about X's and O's. Like, here's the training, let's lock this training in. But as they become better and better and better and better, closer to their genetic limit, that's just because not everybody's going to have the genetic potential to be a pro or the mental ability to be able to get to that point, but they can all get to their best, right? The closer you get to your best, the X's and O's become less important.
Yes.
And the other stuff does, which you would hope that trust is being developed over that period of time. But I still think there's this barrier, like to the point that's really weird. Like
it's intentional secrets.
Like you don't need to know about my sleep. It's like,
okay, I do.
Exactly.
I'm not a sleep doctor, but I can tell you, hey, you not sleeping more than an hour a night is affecting your training.
Yeah. Or I ate a whole box of Ho-Hos 3 times last week, whatever. I did all the other stuff. Right. They don't really need to know about that. So it's always interesting to me how when I'll speak to coaches or hear stories like you just said, it's just a one like little type of thing.
Yeah.
But it's more than that.
I think if a coach can say, I'm not a physical therapist, but tell me about that. I'm not this kind of doctor, but tell me about that because I might have advice. I might have a referral. I had an athlete who the first week we were working together, she was like, I train at 4 a.m. because I can't sleep. She's like, I don't sleep well at all. And I want you to know that. And I was like, okay, talk to me about that. I'm not saying I can fix it, but the more we talk about it, the more accountable she's being with her own sleep. And she's like, I need to work on it. I need to work on it. I'm like, yeah, you do need to work on it. Let's just talk about it. I don't have to know every answer for you, but the more we talk about it, the more I can encourage you to be accountable or help find resources, try new things. As long as a coach just says, I am not this person. I hope you know I'm not saying I will fix your IT band or your knee or these things, but I will do my damned best to work with you as long as you tell me what's going on.
Now, do you find in those conversations many times they know the answers? As
The athlete or the coach?
the athletes, like as they're explaining the whole thing to you, they end up actually answering with
Yeah, like if it's sleep, yes, but sometimes if it's like an injury and they genuinely just can't figure it out, or they haven't had the medical resources to figure it out, and they're like, I just don't know what to do. But with the more simple stuff like nutrition, sleep, water, they're like, I don't drink enough water. I'm like, so so why are we not drinking more water? What's the barrier that we need to break through? Is it work's not letting you go to the bathroom? Like, what's going on there? What can we do? And they're like, oh, I just don't do it. I'm like, okay, so let's start.
Yeah. So where do you go from there? Because that's a big one. Right? That's a big one. I hear that often. So where do you go from there? Because they know, but they're not compliant, but yet they know, and they know it's actually hurting their performance, but yet they still don't. So how do you navigate that conversation?
Well, it's like teaching sex ed to teenagers. You have to know what their hope for getting out of this course is before you even dive into that. If they know they're not drinking water, but they also have no interest in drinking more water, they don't want to hear your advice. But if they say like, I know I should do better, I know my training will do better, you're like, okay, let's talk about it. Now that I know where you want to go with this, because if they don't want to fix it, they don't want to fix it. You can't fix, you can't fix an athlete who wants you to do everything for them. That's just not going to happen. But if they come to you and they're very honest about it, you're like, all right, let's try some stuff. Let's experiment. And I think an athlete who's willing to experiment with new ideas, knowing that the coach is not specialized in these little things we're experimenting with, will do better because they're taking data themselves. They're viewing it as an experiment 2 ways.
Where do you see with the athletes that you help or mentor, because those are 2 different categories? We'll actually speak about both. The athletes that you're coaching, where do you see the greatest room for improvement?
Mental.
Really?
So,
yeah.
I work with a small handful of people, but a lot of the stuff we run into is self-doubt. And I'm like, okay, I'm not a therapist, but I work with some, so I can help you there. And then people not knowing how to work RPEs, or not knowing when to push themselves, when to dial it back, how to not overtrain. Somebody was telling me the other day, she doesn't know how to rest in an off season. So like figuring out their unique needs. There's not a perfect answer for that question.
So how do you anchor the RPE of somebody that you're working with if it's an EMOM? Right? Because I can sit here and say an RPE of, a 1 rep max. It's kind of easy to, you can see that. Or even the RPE of if you're going to take an accessory set to failure, that would be more effort,
right?
A couple reps shy of failure. How do you figure that out when you're dealing with, 10 sets of 10-second bouts or whatever it's going to be?
Honestly, if it's that much and they can't confidently pick it, I'm like, then we need to work with a percentage for this.
Okay.
I know they're not the same, but a percentage is something that we can go, okay, we're going to pick this number and commit to this number so that the athlete doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, I have to work up to it and then I have to do it 10 times. How do I know? Because sometimes you realize at set 8, you're like, oh, shoot. And when I talk to my coach about those things, if I've accidentally done that to myself by set 8, he's like, okay, lower the weight just a little bit and finish it. Like, yeah, it's still not at that RPE anymore, but we're going to finish the set confidently. And that's not all that's
yeah, but I guess we could debate and say you actually still are at that RPE, because if it's based upon exertion, right?
Yes.
The load's just not there.
Yes.
Right? Because that's one of the communication hangups that I see with that, is because we're talking about effort here. We're not talking about maximum load, which that would probably fall more into like a log press training or something like that.
I mean, if it's something that's not even a priority right now, it's just reminding yourself in the muscle movement. It doesn't even need to be an RPE. Your coach can just say, pick a stone for a 10-minute EMOM and finish it. Let me know how it went. Talk to me about it afterwards, because it's an accessory. I don't know why the Derek is, but it's an accessory right now. Or you can just, my coach will also do work to a top set of 5 today. So, as an experienced athlete, I guess it's easier for an experienced athlete to do something like that. But you're doing your warm-ups and you're like, okay, this next one, I can definitely get for 5. That'll be my top set. And you're not thinking RPEs, you're just thinking, how did it feel? Which is RPE, but people overthink RPE a lot.
Well, I want to explore the air quotes for the accessories because I think I know where you're coming from with that.
I only view it as a main movement. So.
Well, I know, but they matter, but they don't, right? Because a lot of that's going to be based upon how much energy was exerted before they're supposed to be done, right? So sometimes they may not be there. Sometimes they may be there. There is a reason. There should be a reason why they're there.
Yes.
Right. So the air quotes kind of come into people just throw shit at the back end because they saw it on Instagram or whatever it's going to be.
And
then it's whatever, it's doing more damage than good, especially in strength sport, because it's still an energy demand you have to recover from.
Right.
Whereas when they're put in there for a reason, that's where the coaching becomes a little bit more complicated, because the reason is there based upon the effort's been maintained in the first few things that you did, or the first two things that you did, to allow the energy for that to actually happen.
That's why they're ordered that way.
That's why they're ordered that way. But if the energy is not there to be able to do that, then you screwed something up on the front end.
Yeah.
You didn't adjust or whatever it's going to be. Or if there's too much energy at the end, then get screwed up on the other side.
Right.
But all this matters to the coach, though, because by the time they get there, if they have enough energy to be able to do some 6 accessories or some stupid shit like that, then you need to know that.
Yeah.
Because then the load of whatever happened beforehand is probably not enough.
Right. But I mean, how often do you have a situation where you have an athlete who's supposed to hit a 1 rep max something and it goes awful, and you start talking and you're like, well, it's not lack of effort, and you realize they didn't sleep last night because they took their kid to the ER, and you're like, tell me that.
Mm-hmm.
Because now I realize that we should not have one. If I had known that before you walked into the gym today, you would not have 1 rep max today. I know athletes don't admit that sometimes, though, because in their head, they're like, I want a 1 rep max. I had a rough night. I want to have a strong day. Okay, why don't you hold it off for a few days and you'll have an even better day?
Or at least have the conversation with the coach, right? Because
right. That's what I'm saying.
Your own training history will dictate that on days that were supposed to be bad, a lot of times they were good. On days that were supposed to be great, a lot of times they were bad. So you've been there.
Yes.
You know that. And if you know their history, you can kind of help them to kind of calculate that out. I think a lot of times they don't want you to know because of all this bullshit. I have to do this because this is going to help, and maybe it will, maybe it won't, but
or you should get hurt.
Yeah. Or set you back.
Yeah.
You don't want to overreach if you're 4 weeks out, crazy things like that. So that would be on the coaching end. Now on the mentoring side, that's a little bit different, right? Because the mentoring side happens more when you're hanging out with the other women you compete with, people that are coming up, you're just having dinner, you're just talking about different shit, but you're talking about the sport, you're talking about, how you got to manage relationships within the sport. If they're in school, you're not going to drop out of school because of the sport, those type of things. With that in that strongman sector that you're in, what do those conversations look like? Because they evolve, they change over time.
They do. I mean, some people want to know how you can be friends with an athlete before the whistle blows and how you can be a competitor the next second. And to that, I would say the people you can see doing that, you don't have to like all your competitors, but to be able to be friendly with somebody and then not just focus on yourself in that event takes growth. And those people last longer in the sport than the people who are like, oh, I hate everyone and I'm an island. But there are also people that just want to know, oh, how do you hype yourself up? What is your motivation? And I'm like, that's not a thing. It's the discipline. It's what I work on. It's how I build myself. And that's different for me. It's going to look different for you. Somebody who didn't have a good lift because they didn't listen to the right song. I'm like, okay, stop taking your headphones to the gym sometimes. Mess up your own training days. Each conversation can just be so varied, but I try to meet that conversation where that person's at. I don't want to assume. Recently, somebody was asking me at the Shaw Classic how I compete so much and how I competed so much this year and traveled so much. And I was like, well, I finished college in May. So I was done with my internships, my work, everything that was so time consuming in May, and able to travel a little bit more this summer. That's me being fully transparent. If you have a full-time schedule, it's not going to work the same. You have to figure out what your limits are. And I mean, there's just not a perfect answer to that question. But
how did you balance all this while you were still in school?
I would build my college schedule to my best ability so that I would have my preferred training times, training days. And towards the end, I was doing 2 internships, essentially school full-time, work full-time, and training. And it was draining as hell, but it was also what I wanted. I knew this is a short time until I'm done with college. And once I'm done with college, it'll be a different thing. So that helped me through constantly checking in with my boyfriend and being like, am I neglecting what you and our house need from me? Like, we bought a house in 2023 while I was in prep for Worlds. We moved. I was still in school. I was working 2 internships. My coach was like, this is the busiest you've ever been. And I was like, yeah, I know, but it's a short period of time and I can handle it. I think there was an interview where you had talked to somebody about when you view a prep, it's not just the 12 weeks, it's the next year.
Mm-hmm.
What does everything look like? And I'm somebody who, at the beginning of the year, I'm like, what does the year look like? And as things trickle in or add in, because you never know your year exactly, I try to see can I handle that for 6 months? If I can handle it for 6 months, okay. So when people come to me looking for specific input, I have to ask a lot of follow-up questions. I'm like, well, what does this look like? And how is that for you? And I mean, are you even able to access this thing? What's your financial situation? Because if you don't give me enough information, I'm going to give you bad advice.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just give you advice that worked for me.
Yeah.
It's always different.
Yeah. So it's the way I like to explain that is if you have your calendar, lay the big rocks out first, right? So you're going to graduate on this day or whatever it's going to be. So there's seasonality, like these 2 months, absolutely training probably can't be full throttle with all the other stuff.
Right.
But these other 10 months can, if you lay the big things out, then you know exactly when they are.
Yeah.
Then here's a vacation time here.
Right. When is my family time? When is my off time? When am I running my comp run through? What does that look like?
But I think most people don't do that, right? So especially if they're competitors, they're training for whatever show it is. Show's over. They really haven't thought about what the next one's really going to be. And I get that, right? Because you want to focus on what it is. Then a day or 2 after, they're looking.
Right.
Then there's the next one. It's like, this kind of should have been planned out.
Yes.
Where if it's strongman can have more bouts than what powerlifting can. But say powerlifting, there's two, you should kind of know. Like this month, maybe not the exact meet, but this 6-week period of time
is focused on this.
Would be a good time to peak.
Yeah.
This would be a good time to peak. Then you have all this other area, and hopefully that's not going to be during your high work time. It should be strict. Everybody can do this.
It's people that are like, well, I'm too busy for all this. I'm like, well, do you use a calendar at all? Do you use a planner? I like a paper. Yeah. I like to scribble stuff out. And they're like, no. And I'm like, that's probably why you feel more busy. When you lay stuff out on paper or on your electronic ones, like however you want to do it, it usually shows you that you're not as busy as you think you are.
Oh, they're not.
Or helps you build a better routine.
Or they're super busy during a certain block of time.
Mm-hmm.
But if they were able to move one of those pieces out of that block into this block, because I'll guarantee the people that say they're too busy, if we go through their whole year and they're completely transparent, there's a couple months they're not doing shit.
Right.
Like, well, that would have been a good time to write the book, or whatever other project they were.
Vacation outside of all your competing and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, the shit's going to pop up, right?
I was definitely only going to compete 3 times this summer. And then I got invited to 2 shows out of the country that I felt like were wonderful opportunities I couldn't turn down. Yeah. Failed world record, accomplished world record, and a 2nd place in an open women's stone show. Like, I wouldn't change those things for the world because of what they did for me. Mm-hmm. But I also turned down 3 other I turned down Scotland, Canada, and the Philippines later this year. Because I knew, I was like, 1, financially, a lot of that stuff is a lot. But 2, I can't keep taking on more things just because they're wonderful opportunities. And my coach kept telling me, he's like, I'm doing my best to manage all these things. But if you take on 1 more show this summer, I don't know if I can do it.
No, but going into the summer, I'm going to speculate here. You knew in the back of your head there's a possibility that other shows could fall in there.
Yes.
Right. So you see what I'm saying? So it was already kind of managed with that possibility of being there.
I mean, winning at Worlds that day, I had already gotten like 3 invites to different shows, and I hadn't had the chance to sit down and view what 2024 was going to look like. And I'm like, I'm getting shows now because I just won the world title. I'm going to keep getting stuff. So I'm going to have to be very picky and choosy. And I turned down the first one, which is Scotland. And I was like, what if I don't get another one? And another wonderful one came through. Like, it's hard, but you have to know how to be mature and pick the right things. And I'm not saying it's the most mature thing to compete 5 times this summer, but.
No, but you're in a different place now. So how you manage the next 12 months,
Yes.
right? Because fortunately, there's a lot of opportunity.
Oh, yeah. Next year, I'm taking the Shaw Classic as if a middleweight could win. You know, I'm not going in with, I hope I'm top 5.
Is that the one that you have the top focus? Because there's usually 1 or 2 each year that you're going to have a primary focus on.
I would say for next year, yes. But there have been some inaugural shows this year that have seemed to be really wonderful. I haven't been a part of all of them. Again, you would have to see how they go. Do they keep succeeding? Do they fall flat? Are they empty shows? What happens next? Those sorts of things. But as of right now, the Shaw Classic is going to be my big focus for next.
So in a way, it's kind of like on the powerlifting side that these new shows pop up and they're exciting, but then 2 or 3 years later, they're dead.
Sometimes.
You know, but as a competitor, what's fascinating to me, and this goes kind of back to what you were talking about, you need to be able to have some networking with your competitors because you want to go where they're at.
Yes.
Right?
And it's a family reunion too at the same time.
Yes.
And friends.
You guys have to decide before the show actually tanks, you know, and goes backwards. Is it time to pull away from this one and go to and you guys do a good job. Strongman does a good job of that. Raw powerlifting does a good job of that too. It's like you can see here's the hot show, but then they all move, and then like how did you know that this was the time? Well, they know because they're all in communication with each other.
Sometimes you're the last one to know, and it's when you get to the show and you realize there's no one else in your weight class, and you're like, I just spent so much money to be here, and this is not as big as this show used to be. And to those shows, when we get there, my boyfriend will go, oh, it's like a local show. I'm like, it's not. He's like, but it is now because everyone else already realized they don't want to be here, and now we're here. I'm like, oh.
Do you change your strategy in that case? I don't want to say this in any egocentric type of way, but if you know it's easy to win, are you going to pull back on it?
I wouldn't say I would pull back on it, but I'm not going to worry about needing a PR in each event or in like, I sit down and I write out the events and what my goals are for the events, not for the show. I write, do I just want to have fun? Do I just want to finish it? Because what if that event was really stressful for me in training and I'm like, okay, just go out there and execute now. No more thinking, execute. Whereas a static event, I could go, oh, I want to PR this or I want to do this because I've never done it before. I try to stay focused on my personal goals and not really change my strategy, but I am a little bit more lax. Okay. I'm not like, I have to be the craziest thing ever, especially if it doesn't feel like there's competition, because there's no need to expend everything you've got. Yeah. Those shows sometimes.
Where do you see the future of strongman / woman going?
I mean, the men are getting better payouts, even like the Strongest Man on Earth show. I want to say it was either in the top 3 or the top high-paying show this year. And now people are saying because Melissa Peacock won so for the men and women of the Shaw Classic, the open men's winner gets to go on to the Strongest Man on Earth, but the women don't have a graduating spot yet. And because Melissa Peacock, who sits at about 180 pounds, won the show against heavyweights, open athletes, etc., people are saying, hey, like we could have a Strongest Woman on Earth show. So these conversations are happening. I think it just comes down to who has the money, which Brian and Carrie do have money, but obviously we don't know the details of where all that money is going. Rogue's got the money. They're trying to do stuff. But if other people can keep the sponsors, keep the engagement, because you have to have engagement to keep it going. If those things can keep happening, I think the women's side is going to keep getting close to the men's, but probably always still be a little bit behind just because the men have had such a stronger lead.
On the women's side, do you run into the same thing that a lot of the men do, that if their online presence isn't strong enough, they may not get invites?
Well, I'm not sure how every promoter does invites because you have Strongman Archives, Strength Results. Those websites keep accurate records, but they don't include everything. They're still missing stuff. Like mine says I'm somewhat good at cardio, and I'm like, that's hysterical because I'm not, obviously. So I don't think it comes down to your online performance or presence. I think it has to do with what you're doing in your weight class. Are you going out into open shows, especially as a smaller athlete? Are you gaining that attention? Are you networking and showing them that you have the criteria or even just the effort to get to the criteria?
Yeah. But if things are equal, are they looking at the online presence?
Possibly. I mean, I'm not sure how Rogue picked the first round of ladies for the pro strongman stage at the Arnold. Some of them had one certain thing specific to get there, but others were...
I guess it'd be easy to really figure out is you just look at who's there, then just go look at their social media presence, and the answer will be glaring.
I mean, Vicky Long has won the pro Arnold twice, and she's not a massive social media person. She's one of the strongest women in the world. Doesn't care about social media.
Well, so sometimes I wonder because I hear a lot of these things kind of like bounce around, and it's like, okay, is this for real or is this just kind of like an excuse?
Yeah.
You know, it's how's it kind of all, unfold and play out because a lot of these are invite only.
I mean, World's Strongest Man has a point criteria that you have to keep matching. Like Mark Felix still matches it at his age and does it really well. But some people, if you remain in the top 5 every year at World's Strongest Man, you're proving that you're still in that high category. But if you drop down to last place and they keep inviting you, eventually they're going to have to go, you're not coming back from last place. You're not doing it. I mean, that organization's been around for so long. They've got a pretty good structure, I feel like, in picking athletes. And then the Shaw class, or the Shaws, for Strongest Men on Earth, they had to bounce off of the Giants Live schedule and different other schedules to pick who they were going to invite for this show, who is recovered well enough, who can do this show, and who can perform well. And they did a really great job of picking those athletes and picking events for, I don't know if you've seen they build events. It's pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah.
No,
I mean, there's been a few pieces that he's ordered through us and then gets modified.
Oh, yeah?
And he'll run, well, the standing press was one. The first one was the leg press,
Okay.
right? And I remember that because, he's Brian speaking to my sales rep, and my sales rep is kind of explaining this idea to me, and I'm like, they're going to fucking do what?
Yeah.
Like, they're going to put a car in the leg brace, and of course, you're not thinking this through. But then the manufacturer's like, what? And all that. And then when it's all said and done, it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. This is safe. It's
they're not just meatheads. Like Nick was explaining how they made the chest press last year when we were backstage. And I'm like, you guys developed this idea? He's like, yeah, most of us sat down and had a conversation about this and the mechanics and the physics and how all that works. I'm like,
oh yeah.
I didn't think you guys were all this smart, honestly.
Oh no, I mean, it's being on the other end, like he's ordering this as the base.
Yeah.
And then there's going to be a bunch of barrels and shit. And you're like, what the fuck?
You can't picture it yet, but he's already been thinking of it.
He's already been thinking about it. He's got fabricators and he's got all this other stuff to be able to kind of put it in there. But at first you're like, this sounds like a really bad idea. And then you start to see where it's going. It's like, oh, this is interesting where this is going. Where do you see the talent pool coming into strongman for women now?
I think the women coming into strongman are...
Where are they coming from? Because years ago we could say CrossFit, was kind of pushing some of that, but I don't know where, because I don't see powerlifters moving. It seems organically grown.
I feel like strongman grows, especially on the female side, from lack of representation. You have a lot of, like, one of the qualifiers for Worlds just happened this weekend, and when they shared all the podiums, you had one woman on a lot of the podiums. So they're not even getting competition at a lot of these shows, which then forces them to go talk to their friends, and they're like, come, please train strong with me. I want someone to compete with me. They're trying to build that network because the issue with being the only competitor in your class is you don't know what the competition feels like. Now you're going to Worlds, and you might get, like, absolutely swamped because you had no idea what to expect. You punched your ticket by just completing each event well. Not that you didn't work hard. It's not your fault other people didn't show up. But in those moments, women realize we need to grow the sport. We need to fight harder. So more female comps, because the female comps get more ladies to go, oh, okay, like there's no scary big guy, like
Yeah.
nothing intimidating. We can just have fun. Those are really awesome. And then just more people saying, please come try strongman. Please come play. Putting on seminars, offering free opportunities, clinics.
Well, it's doable and regressible to anybody.
Hmm.
You know, I think that's where the intimidation comes in, you know, with that. But it's, like I said, I've been trying to figure out where it bubbles up from. I mean, you come out of the military, you just happen to, you get what I'm saying? So it's,
I mean, it's like starting powerlifting. You start whatever sport. I mean, I have met so many people that have come from Olympic and powerlifting specifically. And, you know, a lot of people are like, well, what did you start with? Because none of us start in.
yeah, that's what, yeah.
They're like, where'd you start? And we're all joking like, oh, we all came from powerlifting.
So powerlifting's a feeder.
Powerlifting seems like the biggest one. Olympic also seems like one because they realize that that overhead is going to benefit them so well in strongman. But it seems like most people are just looking for something. They need to feel something, and they realize that strongman is so chaotic and so wild and fun. You don't have to think about anything else when you're doing it. You're not thinking about the mortgage when you're running a yoke. You're thinking about doing this fun game, having a race with your friends. Like, I mean, everyone starts a sport for some reason, but
well, it provides purpose to their training as well, you know, and maybe powerlifting isn't the purpose that they were really looking for, and then it will kind of bleed over, and they can find it there, and vice versa. You know,
I just think
strongman.
more people seem like they're getting a better distraction from whatever thing they're trying to not address in their personal life, whether it be a trauma or an issue. They can distract themselves in strongman, and they have fun, and they're like, let's just do that. Not the strongman. No, that powerlifting is not fun. I guess people just, I've heard a lot of people say that doing the same 3 things all the time, especially if they have a coach that doesn't know how to add in variations or make it fun. They're like, it didn't help me anymore. It wasn't therapeutic.
Yeah.
Whereas strongman, they felt like it was.
Well, I know a lot, and I know some on the other side, you know, where the strongman was just, it was too much.
It was.
You know, there's just way too much going on, too much time training.
Yeah, you start working on service dumbbell, you get good at it, and then it cycles back out for a long time because it's such a niche movement. Like,
yes, and there's technical aspects to all of them, right? Which is, and there's basic components of the technical aspect to all of them that has to be trained all the time. So it's not really like a zillion events you have to learn, you know, but there's the foundations of all those you do, and it's outside of a squat, bench, you know, and deadlift. So there's a lot of movement, you know, back and forth. What I wonder though is there's also athletes that compete in both. I don't know how I feel about that. I think if they want to be the best at what they're doing, they're going to have to pick, you know, just because they are similar to a point, but then it becomes vastly different.
If you're only doing one powerlifting meet a year and one strongman show a year, sure. But who's doing that?
Yeah.
None of us. We're all too addicted to competing that, like you said, as soon as you're done with one competition, you're like, I'm going to take an off season. 2 days later, you're like, I want to go do that one right now. Or I want to go max out and go do this. I think it's hard to sustain both at the same time, but elite level athletes have a better chance of it than the newbies.
Oh, of course.
Because they don't know how to, they think, oh, I have to basically double up everything all the time. Whereas an elite level athlete can go, oh no, we can cycle this out this week, train strongman here, powerlifting here. Like they learn how to balance, not that it's the best idea, but it can be done at a higher level with the right coaching and support, knowledge.
How did the bodybuilding come in for you?
Oh, that was pure curiosity. People had told me that when I cut, I look like I'm bodybuilding ready. And I know that I'm a smaller person who packs on a lot of mass, but I was so curious after I had beefed up for the 2022 Arnold, because there wasn't a 160 class. I had to compete as a 180. We did a dirty bulk. Didn't feel very good. I felt heavy. And I did a 1 month bodybuilding prep where the coach was trying to get me down to 140. He got me down to about 159, 58-ish. And he still wanted to cut more weight off. But I was like, this is probably what we're doing. Like, I'm not trying to do the most insane thing in the world. And I wanted to see what it felt like. And stepping on that stage was an absolutely different feeling. And it made me appreciate the difference in the sport and the difference in the dedication that bodybuilders have, the commitment to their nutrition and their cardio and every little posing every day. I thought that was so daunting sometimes because I'm like, That could be 30 minutes, that could be an hour, depending on how well you're doing it that day. And I was like, it's a different component that I needed to feel. And it was so exciting and so wonderful. And I get off stage and the head coach or head judge is telling me that if I was not so, for lack of better words, he essentially called me chubby, but I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
From his perspective, he was like, you're still holding on too much body fat. If you cut off more body fat in 2 weeks, you could go to the Carolina Cup and possibly go pro. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And it started to like excite me, but I was like, nope, that's not what we came here for. I didn't come here to go pro in bodybuilding. I came here to learn something new about myself, learn about the sport. And I did. And I loved what I did there. But I was like, I need to go back to strongman now because it was taking away from my static strength and my ability to move certain things. And I was like, that's killing me.
Well, how was what do I want to say, the satisfaction? Because they're completely different. Like one is a pageant, I guess, for lack of a better, and the other one is
showing off how you built something with strength. One is showing the strength. And I think in strongman, I can get nervous because I'm like, I can have an amazing log press season and then mess up on the floor. Whereas with bodybuilding, I felt like as long as I stick to what I'm doing, I'm not going to mess this up. Yes, you can mess up poses, but that wasn't what I was concerned about because I wanted to just go out and see that different feeling. And having people cheer for you just standing there flexing was a crazy feeling to me. Because I was like, I'm not doing anything. I'm just flexing. I'm just showing my biceps. And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, it's different. It's a different appreciation, different world, different drivers for sure.
Was there anything that you took from that you were able to apply to strongman?
Yes. How a commitment to your diet does impact things on a deeper level. Just like coming back from my leg, plyometric work became more of my bread and butter. I knew how much more I needed it. And with bodybuilding, the commitment to your cardio and your conditioning. So I guess that is similar to the plyometric stuff, but I knew coming out of it, I was like, okay, your diet's a big deal and your cardio, how you take care of those things impacts every other aspect of your athletic abilities. And I already knew those things, but it just dug those deeper. And I was like, okay, I can't ever let myself fall short in these areas now that I know those things.
Mm-hmm. Now, with the degree that you have and some of the earlier statements that you were making, where do you forecast that future of using the education degree moving forward?
I had hoped, because I went phys ed, added social work later, hoping to help people and maybe open an after school program that focus on getting the homework done for kids that needed supervision, but also finding ways for them to be athletically involved or find new things to love. That was my original intention with it. Right now, I'm a little unsure because starting after school programs does depend on the state, what the state is willing to give you or what you can source with sponsors, those sorts of things. Right now, I'm just coaching and trying to see how I can benefit people because I've always felt like I belong serving my community, whatever that community is. So I know I can use it to serve people in a different way. And I'm in some interview processes right now that are really long for potential careers, but I don't want to risk those things. And I also I'm in EMT school right now. So I got bored waiting through these interview processes. So I was like, why don't I go add another program that is highly employable? So in short, it's hopefully helping the community, just not totally sure.
Yeah. Well, you're at a very unique time, right? And that the time that you're in as a competitor doesn't last forever.
Right.
And it's a window that you want to maximize to the greatest ability, right? So you don't want to sacrifice that, but at the same time, you can't completely sit on that, because it's not 24 hours a day,
right.
So the more skills you can develop,
always learning,
is always going to kind of come out and help on that back end, when it's in there. But you got to always have something moving.
Yes.
Right. Because it's one of the mistakes I'll see with people that are in that spot that you're in is all that drops. And then
just kind of float for a while.
Yeah, and who knows how long the strength career can last. I mean, who knows? You may never have to work. I mean, if things work right, you may never have to work again, right?
So with the long interviewing processes and then being honest with me, they're like, you might not hear from us for a few months. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go sign up for an EMT school so that I at least have something to fall back on. And even if this works out, I can still do both and handle myself because I'm somebody who likes to keep doing stuff. I'm probably going to start promoting shows soon now that I'm done with school and I feel like I can devote time to it. I just don't like rushing into something if I don't have a full intention to accomplish it.
Yeah.
So
you got to be very selective at this point.
If I want to promote a show, I need to make sure it's not going to affect my competitive season and I can give myself completely to this show because I don't want it to fall flat. I wouldn't want to start something unsuccessful. Nobody should.
So how do you walk that through your head?
The calendar, the year planning, talking with my partner. When do we want to buy a second property? When do you want to do this? Because he has some things in the works. And we have to make sure that we're both taking each other into account in these things so that we're accomplishing our goals, but we're not hindering the other person. And we're pretty good at that, honestly.
I'm looking through the topics that you sent. Were there any topics you wanted to go over that I didn't bring up?
I was actually thinking about,
Actually, I saw you made a thing on your Instagram too where people were feeding your questions.
Yes.
So
You want to see what?
Yeah. Well, actually, ask what you were going to ask first, but I had a note that I just saw there of the questions that they were feeding you. But what were you going to ask?
Oh, so like when you were powerlifting, obviously most people know the West Side rules, like you were either 100% or you weren't.
Yeah.
And that was your model when you were doing that. But for newer athletes, especially the ones who aren't ready to go 100%, how to know when to give it 100% and when to go, oh, I'm not willing to do those things. I think that's an interesting conversation. Like, if you were going to talk about someone going pro in bodybuilding, are they willing to maybe take PEDs that other people are taking? Are they not willing to do those things? Are they willing to commit to the cardio, the nutrition, the 100% style that Westside essentially did? Because I find that very hard for people to figure out on their own.
Well, first off, you got to define what the 100% actually means to them.
True.
Right? Because you're all in, now compared to what your all in was, several years ago is completely different, from the bodybuilding, the psychology aspect, the nutrition aspect. You thought you were all in before, but now you can look back and say, yeah, actually, maybe I was just 80% all in, but I was 100% all in on the things that I wanted to be all in on, so that changes over a period of time, so it would be a tough decision for a very young athlete with with not a long training age to actually understand, what that means.
Yeah, I'm thinking about how when my boyfriend and I got together and I would tell him, strongman means everything to me. Don't ever try and take it from me or think I'm not going to do this, that, the other. And then the longer we were together, the more I realized, wow, he's been so kind to be patient with me in those first few years where I was kind of selfish.
Well, see, that's a great example, though, too, because you alienated a huge asset, which can help you become better.
Yes.
Right? He says that's one of those things that I'm talking about is,
you didn't know how to bring these things in.
Because there's psychological aspects, biological aspects, and social aspects that kind of all play, into this, and kind of where they all meet is where that high performance part is. And so are they even mature enough to have that conversation would be, that's first thing.
Very true.
And the second thing would be the other conversation that comes along with all that is in some camps, there is no B plan. And I'm like, you're an idiot, because none of these sports take up 24 hours of your day.
Yes.
And even if you are successful and you make it to the very top, and you fortunately do it at a young age, so you have a longer career, you maybe have enough to be able to live the rest of your life, but it's highly unlikely,
Or something could happen.
Yeah. So then what are you going to have? What's there to be able to fall back on?
Yes. It can be one of the biggest part. I get frustrated when people are like, you can't say strongman's your whole life. I'm like, no, it can be. You can say it's the biggest thing in your life, But as long as you're evaluating the other things that are important to you, like if you're ignoring your family for 5 years straight for a sport, by the time you come back to your family, they might be like,
But again, that's another example, though. Now you're alienating
great.
something that can really help you move forward with that and having that broad view. Unless they have that broad view, then it's not a conversation worth actually having to begin with, because that broad view, when you have that, it may mean there are certain family members you're probably going to say, you know what, I don't want to really be around you.
Setting boundaries.
You know,
You like how to set boundaries, put the right boundaries. Like
yes.
my boyfriend was going to school for physical therapy before he switched over to the tech side, but he retains all of that so well. So if I'm doing something that my coach has described and I'm having my boyfriend watch it just because he's at home with me, he can pinpoint an issue immediately. And he's like, well, actually, your knee needs to look like this and not like this. And it's taken me a while to realize, you probably see this a lot with spouses. You don't want to listen to your partner when they're giving you advice in the gym, especially women. We're like, you don't know what you're talking about.
Especially if you're in a fight about some other stupid.
Right.
Yeah.
And we've joked about what it would be like if he coached me. He's like, I just don't know if we could do it 24/7. And I'm like, that's fair. It's not even worth our relationship. But the fact that he's a great secondary coach is amazing. And it took me a while to grow in that way and realize, okay, I can't alienate him. I need to prioritize him and make sure he's part of this, but also that he's living a life that he's happy with.
Yeah.
Like strongman can be a huge thing for me, but I had to go to college. We had to buy a house. We had to do things that were important for life.
Yes.
Like what if my leg had been something I couldn't come back from?
Yeah, well, that's kind of like that B plan, but that's basically taking the free time that you have and applying it to that, instead of taking the free time that you have and putting it in gaming, scrolling, or watching TV.
A productive hobby.
It's like productive that builds on that. Now, with the PED side of that, it's at some point in time, rest and nutrition, all the main pillars, they all matter, right? And I can even say the professional level, the chemical side matters too. So they all matter. The order in which they're played has a significant difference on the longevity that you're going to have if you were fortunate enough to make it there.
Yes.
Right. So if the first card that they're playing is the PEDs, right? And then normally if they hit a sticking point or a rough patch, then the answer to that's just more PEDs.
Is it before or without a solid baseline?
Without a solid baseline, right? And this happens more today than probably any other time in history, right? So it does happen more because it's so discussed, which I don't think is a bad thing, right? It's good that there's more conversations. People need to listen to all the conversations instead of selectively listening to conversations. But if they fix that first sticking point with better rest or better hydration, better nutrition, better programming, if they play all those cards and then they get there, then they're stuck, but all those things are relatively pretty dialed in. Then they use the PEDs. Now they're already 5, maybe 6, 7, 10 years into it. And now they get that bump there.
They had a baseline. They had data to work with. It wasn't just all these variables thrown around all the time.
Where on the flip side, if they start too soon, they're still going to get to a point where they're going to hit that same area and then realize, oh shit, I need to worry about my diet, my sleep, my nutrition. But their back end got compromised because now they have 6 more additional years of blasting PEDs.
And that's the impulsive person too.
Yes.
Who's working off of, I saw this on Instagram, or I didn't get advice, but I started doing this because I heard about it here. And
yeah, so the bad part is, unless you have super great genetics, it's going to take a decade of training to be able to get to that. If you're inclined to be able to get there to begin with, which more people are than they think.
Yeah.
Right. We all know that. Now, to be the best of the best of the best, we're dealing with outliers, right? But just to be there and to be able to compete with the best, more people have the ability to do that than think they do.
Yeah. I mean,
100%.
We had Bama Burke come out and do the Shaw Classic as her first show. And I was making a joke that they could have promoted that to gain attention for the open class. And she was like, no, what? I'm new here. And I was like, you're an elite power lifter coming into strongman. You're not a nobody. Yes, this is a first strongman show for you, but it's not your first high-level competition. You know how to handle yourself. You've trained your ass off. She took, I want to say 5th and did very well. I'm like, you're not the beginner here like some of these other people who legitimately have never competed once in their life before. They're different. And that's a huge piece, but.
Well, in one way, if they make it to that top level, they might be able to get a decade there with the PEDs. You know, on the other angle, if they make it there, they might have 2 or 3 years, but then they can't do it anymore because their organs are all fucked up.
And they haven't got blood work.
Because they've had either too much in there. But the initial decision of do they love it or do they not love it, you know, it's everybody's who gets attracted to these things in the early age, and like it, they really do fucking love it, right? And
you have to.
Yeah.
Go far. You have to.
Yes. And the pro athletes or the ones that have been around a long time should spend more time with those people because it will remind them of why they started in the first place. Yes. Because you can get in this grind, you know, of meet after meet, show after show, you know, the stupid drama that comes along with all this bullshit that you can get tied into. It becomes a different thing until you're reminded of this is why I really do it, you know? So with those people, you know, as long as they're progressively moving forward, but not destroying their life in the process, then obviously we're all for that, but it's not as easy as they think it is.
No.
You know,
and that's where I think using resources, being willing to say, I need help here, but you got to vet your sources too.
You really do.
Not easy advice to just give and hope they find the right resource.
Because every coach that's going to be honest and say, you know, look, this is going to be a few years. There's another coach that's going to try to say that we can get you there in 12 weeks.
Yeah, if your coach for the first year you're in a sport says, I'll make you a world champion this year,
they're lying.
Bad sign.
I mean, they're 100% lying.
They're 1 in a million, maybe. Yeah. Maybe.
I mean, it will take a year. You know, now the benefit I had at Westside was, you know, I was always that type of personality since I was a teenager competing. Is now that put me in a group where everybody was that personality, where in training crews over the years, some people stay, some people go. It's just the nature of all these sports. If somebody stayed for a couple of years, that was like a long, you know, great.
Right.
But it always seemed like, you know, how long is this person going to stay? Hopefully they'll just stay.
Check it out. When you're doing these, I don't care what kind of chest support you're on, everyone forgets about their feet. Your first line of defense or offense is going to come from leverage from being on the damn ground, right? So no tap dance, just be firm. If you're in this, like I'm thinking about being like in a plank. I'm literally in a plank right now.
There are 3 key factors that are holding your strength back, and in my opinion, the third is the most important. We have covered all these factors on the Table Talk podcast. The guests that I bring out, we're not looking for science-based, and we're not looking for bro science. What I'm looking for are the guests that can help you become stronger. When you look at each one of those camps, they all attribute the success to the people outside of their camps as being outliers. Well, in my opinion, over my 4 decades in the sport, I'm pretty well convinced we're all outliers because everything works for everybody for some period of time. When the focus is on one of these 3 things. First is the physical attribute. That's going to be the genetics, the biology, the recovery, the nutrition, the programming. This is generally where everybody wants to go first. Thus why you see such an overemphasis on program hopping, PEDs, nutrition, certain critical, minute gray areas of all these factors. That's why it's clickbaitable, because this is where everybody wants to go first, but I don't think it's the most important. The second, the mental attributes. This is the psychology that's associated with training, the mindset, the motivation, the focus, not just to the point of how you prepare yourself before a big lift, but how you're preparing your day, how you're preparing your life. Again, if you've been following the Table Talk podcast, you're going to see that these are all reoccurring topics that keep coming up and up. But the most important one is next. To me, the most important aspect is the technical aspect. The technical aspect is how you take all these attributes and you put them together, and it's also the technical aspects of how you perform each and every one of those lifts. The reason why I say this is the most important is because it's the last place anybody wants to look. if their strength isn't progressing. For instance, how many times have you heard people ask, what exercise do I need to do to make my bench bigger? What exercise do I need to do to make my quads bigger? What kind of diet should I do to be able to bulk up or to get leaner? How often do you hear somebody say, what's the best way to put all these variables together? What's the best way to perform an exercise for the outcomes that I'm looking for? This is why we've set up the crew. With the crew, we have 3 tiers. The first tier is just if you want to help support the podcast. We appreciate the support. If it wasn't for your support, we wouldn't have a Table Talk podcast. So tier 1 will give you badges, which I guess are like a popular thing. I don't know, but we appreciate the support and we could use the support. The second tier gives you ad-free podcast, an extra AMA podcast, plus all the fun badges. The third tier is our full Discord crew membership. This is where you'll have access to the community of like-minded individuals that are focusing on pushing their strength to the next level. You'll also have access to webinars, extra content, AMAs, ebooks, programs. There's so much in there, it's hard for me to list everything. And if I did, this video would go too long. Whether you want to just support the podcast or have extra content or have a deeper connection and take your training to the next level, we have a tier for you. Click the join button.
Until this meet, and then whatever. And I get it, it's not their first priority. I was like you, when, I met my girlfriend and college wife at the time. It's like, look, this is what I do. Like, this is.
You're trying to warn them, but it's also a little selfish in the way of like,
100%.
don't expect me to change.
Yes, like everything else is secondary by far. And it's going to be that way for a long time. And it was that way for way longer than what it should have been.
Is this your current wife?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And
so you grew at least.
Yeah, I grew up. Well, yeah, I mean, but it still came to a point, even after retiring, it was like still there. Then it comes to a breaking point where we got to realize this isn't that,
Being a partner to a high level athlete is no joke either. You have to be willing to be patient and be a part of these things and understand sometimes these things aren't about you.
Yeah.
And it sucks, but I love the women that are backstage at like the strongest man on earth, the world's strongest man, because they know their husbands so well. They're like, he's in the whatever room, he's not coming back for 5 minutes. And we're like, well, we need him on the stage like in 5 minutes. She's like, I know, I got him. I've got XYZ handled. I've been doing XYZ. And I'm like, oh, okay. Like you guys are a different breed too. You know how to hang with the elites, but it's a team.
Yes. Yes. So my time there, it's different. Like I don't believe that will ever be replicated anyway, just the way it was. Just there's too many gyms nowadays. There's too many options. There's all these other things to where I had to train with people sometimes I didn't really like, but it didn't really matter. It's my goal still was to make them better than me and vice versa, because when we were in there, it was I think that's good for society in general, to be able to have that. But when as sports evolve and raw lifting probably is part of it as well, because you don't need people to help put shit on and all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Where strongman might kind of be that way, where you can still do it independently, but God, what a help is it if you got 5 people to help set shit up? Because
when I train at my house, because my driveway's slanted, I have to take everything to the street by myself. And I train alone a lot too, where I'm putting myself in my deadlift suit. The last time I competed in my deadlift suit, my boyfriend puts me in it, and he puts me in it really well. But I go out for my first one and I'm like, oh, I got to put it on for the next one, because this whole prep, I've been doing it myself. And that first one felt off.
Well, just think of the time it takes to set all the shit up.
Yep.
Where if you had, 5, 10 other people, it's set up like that.
You want to sandbag less because everyone's helping. And that's the great thing about when I was training at my coach's house on the weekends. Like everyone's tearing down, setting up, and it's super helpful. But when you're by yourself, you're like, maybe I don't have to do this event today. Maybe I don't need all this.
Now, the cons can be, I've always said you always need enablers and then realists. And the enablers are the ones that say you pulled an adductor squatting and everybody heard it pop. And you're like, fuck it, I'm doing the next one. The enablers are the ones that, fuck yeah, just put a knee wrap on that. And fuck. you got to have that, but then you got to have the realist to be able to say, you know what, this might be fucking stupid.
Yes.
Right. So in the environment, say at that West Side, there were no realists. Right. So it was all enablers from that. So I had to find those realists outside of that network, but then be real careful on how I would bring that into the gym, because now you're seen as, you know, a puss or whatever, take all this other
Going against the model that you're supposed to stay.
So in some ways it's optimal, but not optimal.
And that's why I think just your partner, and that should be your best friend in life, and that should be the person you're able to take anything to. They should know what your training is like, and they should understand, oh, when he's peak towards this time, he gets moody. I shouldn't ask him about mowing the lawn today because he's just in a mood. He's just fatigued, whatever. Like, when you have that good teammate, they can be that realist person for you. But
the other thing I had too that I wasn't really able to conceptualize until a couple of weeks ago, I had Dr. David Jackson on, right? And he laid these models out of training philosophy, which was kind of, as I just said, the psychological, biological, social, right? I also was working as a personal trainer at the time, training Gen Top people, right? So now I'm having conversations with people that don't really know anything about powerlifting. They don't know this, but I'm having social relationships that are completely separate from the world that I actually live in, which mentally is giving you a break from that world that you actually live in, which is being able to help you kind of recover, move forward, you know, and
it's making you better too.
Make you grow.
Yeah.
You know,
not everybody wants the same thing you
and everything else, to where that's advice for the younger people there too, even if it is, I think we talked about the example of, even if it's just talking to the person at the grocery store when you check out for 2 minutes, you know, that's a social relationship outside of this whole bubble.
Yes.
You know, that doesn't know who you are. They don't know what you do. They don't know shit about you, you know, but it is social interaction, which is different than this bubble, you know, that we all live in, which you kind of need to thrive, you know, to be able to grow. So that would be some of the other advice I would put out with them.
Getting outside of that bubble.
Yeah, but I think most of the time what I see is because it's so much more popular, that the attrition rate is extremely high. You know, it's always been high, but it's extremely high, very high.
Yes.
You know, so it's one meet out or never, you know, it's just, you know, and so from a mentoring side, you got to kind of like wait and see, you know, are they going to come up, earn, it's going to sound fucked up, but like earn the ability to be mentored.
I don't think that's fucked up.
Yeah, but it's true though, because
like earn, not given.
Yeah.
Some things you do have to earn. You're not going to get the best coaches in the world to take on a nobody if they haven't, like, they've got high level athletes underneath them because they're the best in the world for a reason. They're not trying to teach you how to walk, crawl, walk, run.
Yes.
That sort of thing. I said it backwards, but.
Yes. And it's, if I look back, I was all in on the things that I was conveniently wanting to be all in on.
Of course.
You know, which was higher. So there's other things that I should have been more all in on. You know, my house, really, my relation with my wife could have been better at that time. I mean, certain things like that. But everything's kind of like in hindsight. Because if you were to ask me at the time, I'd say it's going to take away. 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 You know, this is what it has to be.
Like, I'm setting this boundary, and you start putting all these things on the opposite side of the boundary.
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Yeah. But I think a lot of this is why all these sports have gotten better and the athletes have gotten better over a period of time, because the mentoring's gotten better. The training is almost so simplified at this point that people will say, well, it's too confusing. It's over information. Like, it really isn't.
Yeah.
You know, look at the commonalities amongst what everybody says.
Yeah.
And that's the bedrock of everything. But, you know, it's easy to fall for everything that's in the margins. You know, but if they don't do that, like, just forget about the margins and look at the commonalities across the board. The training's easy. The nutrition's easy. It's way easier. And then there's people out there to help, you know, to be able to guide through there. So we're still going to see better and better strength athletes for the next decades to come.
Yeah. And they're talking about their minds more and more. Post-comp blues, what it feels like going into a comp, how to get that laser focus, why nerves can be good for you. Like, those things are all wonderful conversations because, like you said, the training is there. We know the training can be accomplished with most productive programs can get you somewhere. It's the ancillary stuff that you need to know who to seek out for. And more people are talking about these things. And I think it's great.
Yes.
But everything still has growth and takes time.
Now, what do you have? What were the questions? I'm very fascinated to
Some
see
of
what.
them we definitely did already go over. Let's see. My phone is being slow. Like some of them were what got me into strongman, recovery. We did talk about that.
That's the one I want right there.
Oh my God. Leifa, who was one of my first people that I looked up to, wants us to freestyle rap, but
Oh shit, I can't do that.
I can't do that, babe.
Yeah.
How to get us jacked. Commit to a program. Don't dick around.
Well, what does that mean? Right. So that's another one of those things that, what is jacked? Right. Because think of the context of which it comes into, right?
Eddie Hall has abs.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly. So what does jacked mean? You know, and I ask people that all the time because they'll say, I want to get jacked. I'm like, well, what does that mean? Show me somebody that's
I
jacked.
think that's like aesthetically pleasing to them. Because like Arnold obviously won when he was in his prime. But if you put Arnold in that body on these stages, he wouldn't win. Like the aesthetics have changed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, some people will show me somebody that's just got shredded abs. You know, somebody else will show me like a 308 power lifter that, might be 12, 13% body fat.
yeah.
Those are completely, like, if you want to get jacked, those are completely two different things.
But I think the easiest thing you could say is
Get better.
commit to something. Yeah. Don't just jump around. Don't program hop. Don't coach hop. I've never had a different coach other than bodybuilding and some Highland Games help. Like I brought in other people to help with things, but I've been with my coach from day one. Like you don't have to love your coach or even stay with your coach forever. But I think giving your coach in a program at least a year,
Yes.
commit to it, realize why it does or does not work for you, and then be mature enough to go to that coach and say, this is why, and have an adult conversation. And that coach should be okay if you leave them. They should want you to go find the thing that works for you. And if they don't,
Sure.
that sucks.
The jacked one's also kind of funny too, because a lot of people will ask that will actually look more jacked if they lost, 5% body fat.
Oh yeah, took care of their.
But they don't want to do that, right? Because now they're going to be smaller, but on their Instagram, they're going to look way more jacked because you're going to actually see their tricep.
Oh, yeah, drinking. That's a goal. Stop drinking.
Yeah.
Also, you save money. It's a huge money saver. We talked about how I got into strongman, recovery. Someone said how to practice events when you don't have equipment.
That's a good one.
I think we could go over each event. That would be.
Yeah, do that because I do know when I had Ilya on, he travels a lot and sometimes he's got to train in commercial gyms and find creative ways to kind of simulate.
So one for stones is Zercher. And if you don't know what Zercher is, you're putting the bar in the crease of your elbows and you're essentially in a squat and pulling it from below. Zercher using the pit sharks. That's a good stone replicant that you can find in a lot of commercial gyms. Because you could say, oh, use sandbags if you don't have stones. But if you don't have sandbags, you don't have sandbags. So doing Zerchers like that is a really good way to train getting it to your lap. However, the extension, you sometimes do need a sandbag because you will band yourself to a piece of equipment and extend with sandbags to feel that extension. But I mean, for log, you can use a Swiss bar out of a rack, and that at least gets your hands in the right position.
Mm-hmm.
Most gyms do have those. Again, you probably have to go to a powerlifting gym, not Planet Fitness.
Yeah.
There's so many. Bag toss is weird because people think you can use a kettlebell, and it doesn't work the same because a kettlebell doesn't swing the way a bag might. So if you use kettlebells too much, a bag is really going to throw you off. Not that it can't be done, but also what gym is going to let you throw kettlebells overhead like that without hurting somebody. But I mean, deadlifts, you could switch up your deadlift variation so many ways, like car deadlifts, trap bar. Elevated deadlift, blocks. Deficit stuff, deficit. I mean, there's a lot of crossover. Plates, do the plate pinch margins for grip for farmers. Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, the list goes on, but I guess in total, seeking out different gyms or reaching out within your immediate community to see who might have the piece of equipment. How can you befriend them? How can you both benefit each other in some kind of training relationship? Even if you're just paying them a few bucks to come out on the weekends and play with something that they have, it's an option, but you're not going to find these options if you're not asking
Yeah.
and searching.
Well, I don't know the total number of people that have competed in strongman, say, well, the year is getting close to ending this year, but I'm sure it's in the thousands.
Probably.
They figured it out. You know, not every one of them have access to a gym that has all the strongman equipment.
And you might get to a show where you had no ability to train that piece at all. I would hate to see it, but I hope it's a low stakes show. So you don't have to go balls to the walls in case you really don't get it that first time. You go out there and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to see if I can figure this out on the fly, have fun with it. If it goes well, cool. If not, I didn't get to train it. But you just be honest with yourself.
But there's something else at that show, other people
Yes.
that will be able to help give you an idea of where to train with all those other.
Very true. Who else is competing at this show? Where are they traveling from? Are they coming from the same place? What do they have? That sort of stuff. Somebody said, how do you get out of a constant training mindset in order to rest? I want to hear your take on that. I don't know if she means off season or just like you're home for the night and you need to put it to bed.
Well, a training mindset is very fluid, right? The way that you're thinking about the implement while you're resting is not the same as when you're approaching the implement. The way you're thinking about a lift is not the same as when you approach the lift. So
yes,
it's already very fluid to begin with. You know, the way you walk,
finding the balance.
Yeah, the way you walk in the gym is going to be different than the way that you walk out of the gym. So the question would be, are you obsessing about your training 24/7? Well, then if you're obsessing about your training 24/7, why are you obsessing about your training? What part of the training are you obsessing about? Because that part's probably the part that needs work. And if you can then define that part that needs work, then you can find somebody to be able to help you that's already dealt with that part that needs work to be able to help with that. And now you're not obsessing about that. Then the mindset.
Yes.
It's
perfect cycle.
Yeah.
If it was off season, I think it would just be letting yourself have more fun.
Yeah.
Like just what you said, but adding in the, okay, I don't have to be as intense every day if I don't want to. Like you're still doing the work, but you can take a few more breaks and talk to your buddies across the gym and like have fun. If you accidentally miss a workout.
Well, again, I think that can be an example of selectively choosing the things that you want to be all in on. You know, so you have very strong training mindset, very weak recovery mindset, very weak nutritional mindset, very weak, you know, so if the training is that important, then you're going to want to bring up the weak points. If you have a lift that sucks compared to all the other lifts, you're going to do what you can to be able to bring that lift up.
Yeah.
So taking that same approach and holistically applying it is realizing that if that training mindset's leaking into a recovery mindset or a nutritional mindset or whatever it's going to be, that again, there's that weak point.
Yeah.
You know, to be able to do that, because we all love to train, kind of. I mean, you do it long enough, there's a lot of days you really
feeling.
We do, but in full transparency, there's a lot of times you got to go to the gym and you don't want to go to the gym.
It's the discipline drive.
You know, it's a discipline driving that. Very fortunate to have that training mindset you can't get out of because you haven't run into that yet, you know, but it will come.
Part of me wonders, because I know her a little bit, I wonder if part of the thought is also, if you're done with your competitive season by, let's say, August, and now you're on social media and you're seeing everyone else go play and have fun, are you like, oh, I want to, but I said I would rest, like knowing how to commit to your boundaries and saying, no, I said I was done competing. I'm just going to watch them compete and enjoy it. I wonder if that's part of it, because it is hard to compare yourself or to not compare yourself when you see other people.
It is, but that's just reframing the priority though, right? Because if your priority is to actually get better, then you know there's a reason why there's that off season. So the next on season is to get better.
Yes.
Right.
Bodybuilders talk about that a lot. They're like, I'm growing.
You know, the off season's the most important point for any strength athlete.
Right. But maybe the more you say it, the more you can affirm it to yourself. Like, I said I would grow. I said I would fix this before next year. Or I just said I wouldn't spend more money competing this year because...
Well, I don't know if you need to say it because the goal is to get better.
True.
You know, so
True.
if you continue down that same path, you're not getting better.
Yeah.
So then you're really not serious.
Just get off social media and stop
Yeah.
obsessing over people.
Well, there's that, you know, or just find other things to follow.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm getting ready for a big show, if I am starting to focus on somebody who's in my category too much, I won't unfollow them because I still view them as a friend, but I'll just go mute their page for a little bit. That way it doesn't come across my feed for a little bit and it's not becoming a stressor that I'm allowing to persist. I'm like, I still love you from afar. I just don't want to see you working out at this moment. I want to have my tunnel vision. You have yours. We both go do our best,
Yeah.
and whoever wins, wins.
You can mute them. I mean, if it's Instagram, you can mute them. That way you're not
What
unfollowing.
I'm saying, it's great.
Yeah.
Could you imagine if you had to, people would do that all the time. They'd go follow, unfollow, and it would cause drama.
Oh yeah. Like when you unfollow me, but you just mute it.
When really, it's not. that
But
crazy.
if the priority is high enough, this shouldn't be a conversation. You see what I'm saying? If that priority is high enough, then that shouldn't matter. Like the criticism shouldn't matter. None of that should matter if the priority is high enough.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess I'm saying from my perspective
Yeah.
because I love the feeling of competing. So when I say I'm done for the year and I see other people having fun myself, I'm like, oh, I want to do that. Why didn't I do that show? Why don't I do the next show they're doing? And then I'm like, no,
Yeah.
you can have fun later. We all get to have fun at different times. Like,
Well, that can get deep though, right? Because then that can become the conversation with your sports psychologist of, do I like competing more than I like winning?
yeah.
Right. And that's a question that probably needs to be answered because that can change the whole trajectory of why you do what you do.
But what even is the feeling of winning? I feel like when you win, well, for me, it's like a relief of all that hard work was just executed properly. Even if the mistakes were made, we did it well enough to still achieve the end goal. And for me, it's a good relief of like, yes, it happened. It's not really the trophy that's exciting. It's like we accomplished everything, the journey. The journey is always the best part. And then when you finish it, you're kind of like, oh, it's over. And then the post-comp blues set in. And I think post-comp blues is also where people are on social media and they're starting to compare themselves to somebody else. And they're like, well, they're competing 20 times a year. Okay. That's not for everybody.
Yeah.
That's not a good idea for anybody, but.
Well, we spoke earlier about laying that plan out too.
Yep.
You know, so laying a solid plan because winning's not everything, right? It's not guaranteed. You know, everything can be perfect. You can go in and break your leg, you know, so nothing's really guaranteed, you know, from that but if the competing is that bigger force, there's something else associated with the peaking, breaking PRs and doing your absolute best. And you know, you're not going to do your absolute best if you're competing 12 times a year. Right. But maybe due to, financial obligations, because I know a lot of the strongman will compete way more than they should, you know, because it's financially productive for them to be able to do that.
Yes, if you can win on the right stages,
they can win on the right stages, and that's how they're making their living. And so then you got to reorganize the training, you got to reorganize everything else because you're not ever really peaking, except maybe once a year.
Right.
You're just doing your job, which is pro strongman, to be able to earn a living.
I mean, if you talk to Ed about this, we were having a conversation in Norway about how he knew exactly when everything was going to happen throughout the year. Like, I'm sure maybe some years he took on stuff that maybe he didn't expect at the beginning, but he never had to like replan after a meet because he had the next thing. He knew exactly what was going on. And he was telling me he never really had deload weeks because he knew how to program himself so well to efficacy, and he was doing it well.
Yes.
He knows what he's talking about, obviously.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's one of the things you kind of learn too late. You know, if you could optimally lay out 4 years, like a whole quadrennial of when you're going to compete and all this other kind of, and then stick to it, it would probably be way better.
Yeah.
You know, but
not everybody can analyze data on themselves that well either.
No.
Ed's obviously an anomaly. You are too. But normal people, I don't think, can analyze their own data and use it effectively all the time. Even if their coach is trying to tell them, like, we do need to keep your weight and how this cut went, and I need you to journal this, and they don't do it. And they're like, well, we can't progress from there because we don't have the data. The athlete told, I don't even know how to use it. It's like, well, the coach did.
Exactly.
You didn't give it to the coach.
Yes, and I would push back and say that nobody has the ability to do that by themselves. There always needs to be somebody kind of looking from the outside in because there's too much inherent bias.
Yeah.
You know, things that you just hate to do, that you'll find alternatives instead of just doing the actual thing that you really need to do. And you need that other voice to be able to kind of say in there.
Yeah. I mean, even especially now in the age of influencing, excuse me, you should be able to go to your coach and say, hey, why are we doing the training block this way? And they should explain it to you. Or if you see something on social media and you're like, hey, let's say Mitch Hooper put out this advice piece about this movement. What do you think about it? And then use it as a conversation. Don't just take it and go, oh, I'm going to secretly add this to my program without telling them, like all of those things. Like your coach might look at it and go, well, that works for Hooper because he's bigger than you. That actually wouldn't work for you because of XYZ, or maybe we can play with it. But like all the social media crap nowadays, people just take something and run with it. I'm like, you didn't even get second input.
No. And exactly. And it could be a great idea, but it could be one of those things where, you know, this is a great idea. We're too far along now. You know, you're just 5 weeks out, but we'll definitely stick this in our notes for when we go to look at the next off season, right? Normally I can almost guarantee by the time that comes around, that's no longer be a thing.
Right.
You know,
Or it's not interest.
the athletes aren't going to be interested
It's not
in it.
trending anymore.
No, it's not popular. So it kind of plays into that whole thing.
I did notice that when people started switching, where it became more common in strongman for people to go from the hamburger to the hot dog to the hamburger bag pick. And with the hamburger, if you can row it to your chest, you're eliminating a lot, maybe like a second or two. But if you can't do it, you're going to actually move slower in that movement. And I've seen athletes get to a show and they're like, oh, well, everybody else is picking it up that way. So I'm like, you've never done it before. You didn't spend any time practicing that one. You're going to mess it up the first time because one, you're not going to be confident about it. But two, you probably don't know exactly how to execute it in this moment. And then they do it and they're like, why didn't it go well? I'm like,
Yeah.
I'll let you figure that out.
Yeah.
Not any of my athletes, but like peers.
No, but it happens.
It does.
It happens across all sports. How would somebody go about finding you, getting hold of you for coaching, mentoring, or whatnot? What's the best way?
Probably Instagram. My Instagram does have my email linked to it, and it has an intake form on my bio at the bottom underneath all the sponsor links and whatnot at Nancy. It's NAN_CIEE.
We'll have the link in the bio. We'll make it real easy. So we'll link in the description wherever you're listening. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, I really appreciate you having me out here. I felt very special being invited here. So
No, thank you for coming out. This has been great. Guys, we are done.
All right, guys, thanks for watching the video to the end. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and click here, 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 or here for more videos.